Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's King of the Undead. Chapter 1. He grabbed a handful of water with both hands and poured it on his face. The boy shook his head, which was a bit groggy. He raised his head and looked at the figure in the mirror. He looked about 15 or 16 years old, with short blonde hair, a tall nose, and a bright face. With his piercing green eyes, naked upper body and 8-pack abs as neatly arranged as chocolate, he looked like a Hollywood star. "Hey, Wayne, it's time to go to class." When the boy in front of the mirror was looking at the mirror in a daze, a fat man called out from the door of the toilet. This little fat man is called Steven. He lives in the same dormitory as the boy. He is about the same age as the boy. His big round eyes are staring at the boy in the toilet. The place they were in was not a school, but an orphanage called Home in New York. However, this orphanage was different from ordinary orphanages. The age requirement for accepting orphans in this orphanage was not 14. Under 16 years of age. Home Inn will provide accommodation for all orphans in the hospital, but food is only provided free of charge to orphans under the age of 12. If orphans over 12 years old want to eat, they need to take some cleaning or maintenance jobs in the orphanage to earn money for food. Every morning, the orphanage offers some different courses, and the orphans can choose to study according to their hobbies, while in the afternoon, some older orphans work. Fatty and Wayne have complained about the strange rules of the orphanage more than once. After all, the orphanage is located in New York City and covers a large area. From the fact that there are only 2 orphans living in one dormitory, it can be seen that the orphanage does not lack funds. And because of the strange rules of the orphanage, the originally harmonious relationship between the orphans has become a little subtle. Before the age of 12, there are almost no conflicts of interest between the orphans, and the usual conflicts are just minor fights. After the age of 12, orphans will inevitably have more friction with each other in order to compete for jobs that are easy and lucrative. The competition between orphans is not like the competition between ordinary primary school students. Friendship comes first and competition comes second. Most orphans enter orphanages due to unfortunate family circumstances, and some orphans have even been homeless in society for several years. They have seen more of the dark side of society and are no longer just babies. Therefore, in order to live a better life, they are bound to use more intense competition methods. This also leads to competition between orphans, sometimes even leading to large-scale fights. This also causes several orphans to die in the orphanage every year, but no management ever stepped in to stop it. This is also the main reason why Wayne has been insisting on exercising. If you want to survive in an environment like the orphanage, you need to ensure that you have enough strength to be able to smash those little gangsters when they come to trouble you. Tooth. Okay, come right away. Putting away his thoughts, Wayne turned around and walked towards the classroom with the little fat man. On the way from the dormitory to the classroom where classes are held, you need to pass through a wide hall. This hall is the main entertainment place for the orphans in the orphanage, because there is the only TV in the orphanage. This 100-inch large-screen TV is now showing daily news. In California, a man suspected of being a mutant attacked a couple next door to him. Although there were no casualties, this also caused a rift between humans and mutants. The already fragile balance has become even more unstable. Today we are going to talk about the modern history of the United States. In front of the blackboard, a bald man was holding a thick book and said to the students below, "Our country's hero, Steve Rogers, has made great contributions to our country. Do you think mutants are dangerous, Steven?" Thinking about the news he just saw, Wayne asked the fat man next to him. "Is that crazy guy on TV? Mutants just have superpowers, not crazy." The little fat man curled his lips in disdain. Now, as long as someone is attacked, those unscrupulous reporters will immediately put this label on the mutant's head. Ha, it's really hard for your little brain to think through this kind of problem. I thought you only had sweet noodles in your mind. Wayne looked at the little fat man with an exaggerated expression. In his impression, this little fat man had no brains at all except for some insights into eating. "Shut up, Wayne." The little fat man glared at Wayne fiercely. Wayne was good at everything, but his mouth really made people want to sew him up. "It's you two who get up again and tell us what kind of spirit Captain America conveys to us." Wayne comes first. Wayne and the little fat man's chat without anyone else finally caught the bald teacher's attention. At this time, the bald teacher was looking at the two of them fiercely and scolding them loudly. Captain America told me that we should stick to what we think is right. This is a spirit that is worth learning. Wayne looked at the bald teacher seriously. Seeing that the angry expression on the bald man's face had eased, Wayne continued. For example, I think listening to you in class is a waste of time, so I stick to my point of view and plan to use your class time to talk about other things. Bang! Before Wayne could finish speaking, the bald teacher became even more angry and couldn't help but throw the chalk at Wayne. However, due to lack of accuracy, the chalk hit the fat man next to Wayne. Wiping the chalk dust on his face, the little fat man stood up helplessly. Every time he was with Wayne, some unreasonable disaster would happen to him. Teacher, I think I like Tony Stark more than Captain America. Tell me why. The bald teacher was a little embarrassed because he hit the wrong person, so he asked in a slower tone. You have become famous at a young age, you have a lot of money at a young age, and you have slept with more girls than you have ever seen. Aren't you envious? The little fat man's eyes were shining and he said to the shiny bald head in front of him. Yes, I agree with him, Tony is our idol. Wayne next to him immediately hit the target. Get out of here. Amid the bald teacher's scolding and the cheers of others in the class, Wayne and the little fat boy got their wish and walked out of the boring classroom. After returning to the dormitory, a somewhat bored Wayne and the little fat man complained about the bald teacher for a while and then slowly fell into a deep sleep. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Wayne and the little fat man arrived at the door of the task collection area on time. The so-called mission collection area is actually named by the orphans themselves. It is actually an ordinary room where they receive their daily work. At this time, there were some orphans waiting outside the task receiving office who were ready to receive the task. A middle-aged man in his 40s was sitting in the room, throwing the note in his hand to him with an impatient expression. He is the staff member responsible for assigning tasks to the orphans in front of him. Hi, boss, I'm here to pick up the mission, mine and Wayne's. Relying on his fat body, the little fat man successfully squeezed past the orphan in front and said to the middle-aged man. At this time, Wayne stood aside and showed off his arm muscles to some of the unconvinced orphans. Both Wayne and little Fatty are recognized as one of the most difficult people to mess with in the orphanage. Wayne grew up in an orphanage and knows the rules of survival in the orphanage. His fierce fighting style and long-term perseverance, his training made few people in the orphanage his opponents. As for the little fat guy, despite his fat body, his strength is comparable to that of Wayne, who has been exercising for a long time. In addition, when he attacks, he only selects some sensitive areas to attack, which makes many people unwilling to fight with him as a last resort. Face this shameless fat man. After taking a look at the orphan who was squeezed out by the little fat man and dared not speak out, Abbas's face flashed with disgust, and then handed the little fat man a note. What mission have we received? Seeing the little fat man coming out with the note in his hand, Wayne touched the little fat man's shoulder curiously and asked. The tasks in the welfare home are all distributed on a dormitory basis, but the method is rather strange. Instead of directly telling you what you need to do, you are given a sealed note and the tasks are distributed immediately like a lottery. Under Wayne's gaze, the little fat man carefully opened the note, his hands trembling subconsciously, and he saw that it read, "Clean the toilet." Quote. Is the god of the toilet a relative of yours? Wayne asked the fat man with a dark face. This is already the 100th time they have been given the task of cleaning the toilet. Wayne used his very poor mathematical knowledge to calculate that this is simply lower than the chance of winning the lottery. What can I do? I'm also desperate. The corners of the little fat man's mouth were twitching at this time. He was really fed up with the smell of the toilet. At this moment, Wayne glanced out of the corner of his eye and suddenly discovered that Messi and Ronaldo, who lived in the dormitory next to them, were happily walking out of the room holding a note. There are some children in the orphanage who were brought back from childhood. They don't know their own names, and the staff at the orphanage don't have the time to help them name them one by one, so some of the children in the orphanage have their own names, such as Way. Well, Ronaldo and Messi gave themselves star names because they like football. Another example is that the two children in the dormitory to the right of Wayne admired Hollywood stars, so one was named Stallone and the other was named Jack Chang. This also makes the orphanage look like a star-studded institution just by looking at its name. Hey, What's your mission? When Messi and Ronaldo came nearby, Wayne suddenly blocked their way and asked curiously. Messi and Ronaldo, who were secretly excited, suddenly felt an ominous premonition when they looked at the familiar scene in front of them. In their minds, this was the countless times that Wayne appeared in front of them with a curious look on his face. Last time, the last time, and the last time, Wayne had always been the first to show up. He asked them curiously what their mission was, and then forcibly exchanged their missions. In total, they have helped Wayne and Little Fatty clean the toilet about 100 times over the years. My name is Messi, and I am panicking now. Messi, whose smile gradually disappeared, reluctantly opened the note in his hand. He knew that as long as Wayne was targeting him, resistance would be useless, so he might as well accept the reality. On the other hand, Wayne and the little fat man, who were originally gloomy, suddenly became excited, because Messi and Ronaldo were assigned the task of going out for shopping. Among the various tasks in the orphanage, the children's favorite task is to go shopping. Because the orphanage is usually gated, all the orphans are not allowed to step out of the gate of the orphanage. They can only go out to see the bustling city and experience modern life when they are out shopping. Just when Messi and Ronaldo resignedly handed the note in their hands to Wayne and were about to walk towards the toilet with heavy steps, a rough voice came, causing them to pause. I heard that you got a task note for going out for shopping. Wayne and the little fat man followed the sound and saw 4 orphans walking towards them. The person who spoke was a young black man walking at the front. He seemed to be a full 2 meters tall, as strong as a chimpanzee, and a full head taller than Wayne, who was 1 meter tall. Now here with me, what do you want, Joseph? After taking a look at the menacing Joseph and the earthy-faced Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi, Wayne took the initiative to take a step forward, stood between the two groups, and looked at the yelling Joseph in front of him with a grin. Then you'd better give it to me. Ignoring Messi and Ronaldo who sneaked away, Joseph looked a little apprehensive as he looked at Wayne coming up to them. Joseph only came to the orphanage in the past 2 years. It is said that he was a member of a gang before joining, so after entering, he directly brought in the tricks of the gang outside. He founded an organization called the Black Dog Gang, which currently has more than 20 orphans, making him run rampant in the courtyard. The people they were targeting were not like Wayne and the others, they just exchanged tasks and that was it. They won't do these trivial tasks themselves, but directly force other orphans to hand over all their money, and if they don't want to, they will be beaten severely. They will only go out once a month on a purchasing mission on the 1st of every month. With this opportunity, they can go out and buy some cigarettes and even pornographic products. Why? The little fat man next to him was a little unhappy. They only had 1 or 2 opportunities to get her switched to this kind of purchasing task every month. He didn't want to give it to others so easily. Do you think that because you look like a chimpanzee, I need to care for animals and care for you? Wayne sprayed him unceremoniously, and his face turned cold at the other party's commanding tone. He didn't have a good impression of these people who bullied the weak and feared the strong all day long. Upon hearing Wayne's words, Joseph was startled for a moment, and then became a little angry when he realized what he said. Having been the king of the orphanage for a long time, he had long been accustomed to others talking down to him. He had always heard that Wayne was difficult to deal with, so he had always deliberately avoided conflicts with Wayne, but he didn't expect Wayne to be so disrespectful to him. Humph! Joseph snorted and suddenly punched Wayne. Wayne, who was caught off guard, was directly punched in the head. He subconsciously touched the slightly bleeding wound on his head. The pain made Wayne a little angry. Without saying anything, he rushed towards the tall Joseph. The little fat man next to him also reacted the moment Wayne was beaten. Looking at the 3 younger brothers behind Joseph who were still in a daze, he pounced directly and relied on his weight advantage to pin one of them down. The boy who was crushed felt an elephant sitting on him and almost vomited out his lunch. Before he could fight back, he saw a fist enlarging in his eyes. After the little fat man knocked out the first boy, the other 2 boys finally reacted and glanced at Wayne with some fear. They made a tacit choice to stay away from the battlefield there and attack the nearby fat man together. Both of these 2 younger brothers grew up in orphanages. They were beaten by Wayne all the time, so they looked at Wayne unconsciously and felt a little at ease. 5 minutes later, just as the little fat man successfully knocked down the 3 younger brothers, Wayne hit Joseph in the jaw with an uppercut. Click. At the same time as the sound of broken bones sounded, Joseph, who was like an iron tower, finally fell heavily to the ground. Hiss. With his eyes black and blue, Wayne reached out and wiped the blood from the wound on his forehead. The contact between the sweat and the wound made Wayne take a breath of cold air, and then he vented his anger and covered the man on the ground with a face of pain. Another hard kick from Joseph in the jaw. I'm not targeting anyone, you Black Dog gang are all rubbish, let's go. Wayne glanced at Joseph, who couldn't get up, with some pride. Under the adoring eyes of the surrounding crowd, the two boys who were still standing walked out of the courtyard with their heads raised like cocks that had won a fight. After leaving the entrance of the orphanage, looking at the crowds of people outside, the wounds on Wayne and the little fat man seemed to no longer hurt. After quickly purchasing the daily necessities needed for the orphanage's tasks, he was not returned directly to the orphanage. Instead, they walked through the dense flow of people and walked to a trail 2 blocks away from the orphanage. A flashing red sign with white characters instantly caught their attention. I saw Sichuan Hot Pot Restaurant written in 5 Chinese characters on the signboard. This is where Wayne and Little Fatty's only purpose is to eat hot pot every time they go out. Wayne, who was born in an orphanage, didn't know the existence of hot pot restaurants. It wasn't until the arrival of Little Fatty when he was 7 years old that he was exposed to this delicious food for the first time. Although that experience cost him all his hard work. All the money saved after a month of hard work. Unlike Wayne, the little fat boy was sent to the orphanage when he was 7 years old. Originally, the little fat boy's life was relatively happy. Although his family was not very wealthy, he at least had a harmonious family. But a car accident shattered the originally happy family. The other relatives were not willing to support another little boy, so they jointly decided to send him to an orphanage and became Wayne's roommate. Here we go again, King. After entering the door, the little fat man greeted a sweaty Chinese uncle who was busy in the store enthusiastically. This unattractive Chinese uncle is the owner of this hot pot restaurant. Since Wayne and Little Fatty come here almost every month, they have a very harmonious relationship with the boss. Let's order more meat this time, Wayne. After being led to a seat by Wong, the little fat man took a gulp of saliva and said to Wayne, who was looking at the menu. Okay, don't worry, you're so fat, can't you lose some weight? Wayne looked at the little fat man's chubby face. He could grow so fat in a place like an orphanage. This little fat man is really a headache. Number 1. These are all my hidden muscles. The little fat man quickly explained that all their money was placed with Wayne. If he offended Wayne, he would have no meat to eat. 10 minutes later, all the pots and dishes were served. Wong also had some free time and sat down at Wayne and Steven's table. You haven't been here for a long time. What happened to the injury on your face? Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Wong said to Wayne and the little fat man with a smile. Since Wayne and Little Fatty often visit, Wong has watched them grow up. Wong loves these 2 sensible orphans from the bottom of his heart. Isn't it? Because Joseph and his gang are doing evil everywhere, and another person died in the orphanage some time ago, so they were not allowed out at all some time ago, but today we gave them a severe lesson. When it comes to this matter, the little fat man is a little angry and a little proud. Those people are completely gangsters, and he doesn't know why the management of the welfare home tolerates the existence of such people. Hey, the death rate has been getting higher and higher recently. Wayne also sighed. Having grown up in an orphanage, he was considered a veteran, but since this year, the mortality rate in the orphanage has been significantly higher than in previous years. When talking about this topic, the originally pleasant atmosphere suddenly cooled down. Wong had heard about the various deeds of the orphanage, but every time the police came, apart from taking away 1 or 2 orphans who had committed crimes, they did not know much about the orphanage itself. Any restrictions or corrections. After comforting Wayne and the little fat man, Wong gave them several plates of mutton for free, and then continued to get busy in the store. The change in the atmosphere did not affect the appetite of Wayne and the little fat man. After eating 12 plates of meat, Wayne slumped down on the chair, bulging his belly, and waved to Wong, who was not far away. Pay the bill, King. I'm treating you to this meal today. Just come here more often in the future. You are about to leave the orphanage at your age. You won't have to have money in the future. Wong smiled and shook his head. He could still help the 2 orphans as much as he could. Then we won't be polite to you. When I get rich, I will help you open a bigger hot pot restaurant. The little fat man rubbed his round belly and did not reject Wang's kindness. Wayne and little Fatty are about to turn 16, and according to the regulations of the orphanage, they must move out of the orphanage at the age of 16. At this time, Wayne and little Fatty were both looking forward to and fearing the life outside. After all, no one from the orphanage had come back to share the outside world with them. Maybe it's because they have no feelings for the orphanage, Wayne thought. When Wayne and the little fat man were slowly walking out of the hot pot restaurant, burping, a piercing scream came from the street not far away. Wayne and the little fat man subconsciously looked over there, and saw a short, bearded thief reaching out to pull the bag of a woman in front of him, and the scream came from this woman's mouth. "Give me the bag, you idiot, or I'll kill you." The short thief's tone became urgent when he saw that the woman's scream had attracted the attention of others. "There is a beautiful woman who needs my help." Wayne subconsciously shook off the fat man next to him, turned into a street superhero and ran over there quickly. Due to frequent fights and long hours of exercise in the orphanage, Wayne was very strong even though he was only 15 or 16 years old. Before the short thief's attention could be diverted from the woman, Wayne had already run up behind the short thief and punched him hard on the head. Ah! The short thief who was hit on the head subconsciously let go of his grip on the woman's bag, turned around, and met Wayne's second punch, this time hitting him directly in the nose. "Superheroes are here to stop you, Hobbit." Looking at the thief who fell to the ground, Wayne shouted exaggeratedly. "Kid, if you like to meddle so much, then go to hell." Two consecutive fists made the short thief, who was already a little emotionally unstable, even more violent. While getting up from the ground, he lifted his other hand from his arms. He pulled out a pistol and yelled at Wayne. Bang, bang, 2 gunshots rang out, and the crowd who had been watching the excitement immediately began to panic. Panic-stricken people began to look for a safe place, including of course the beautiful woman in need of help. For a moment, only Wayne was left on the noisy street, looking at the wound on his chest in confusion. The severe pain made his brain feel dizzy. Wayne turned around and saw the little fat man running towards him with an anxious look on his face. Then there was a wave of dizziness in his brain, and he fell to the ground and lost consciousness. "Wayne, how are you? Hey, answer me." The fat man rushed over and held the shoulders of Wayne who was about to fall to the ground, feeling a little helpless. The accident happened so suddenly. The little fat man thought that Wayne could easily deal with the thief, but he never expected that the thief actually carried a pistol with him. Outside the emergency room of the hospital, the little fat man squatted against the wall, holding his aching head with both hands. After Wayne fell, the little fat man felt waves of tingling sensations coming from his head, plus his friend was shot. This boy, who was not yet 16 years old, was a little overwhelmed. Da 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 da, came the sound of rapid footsteps. The little fat man subconsciously raised his head and saw Boone, the director of the orphanage in formal clothes, walking towards this direction under the leadership of 2 medical staff. "It's okay, Steve." Seeing the little fat man lying on the ground, Dean Boone knelt down and touched the little fat man's head to comfort him. "It's all my fault, Dean. If I had held him back, Wayne wouldn't be lying in there." The little fat man's tears couldn't stop flowing out. The moment he saw Dean Boone, the little fat man couldn't stop crying. The uneasiness in Fatty's heart became even stronger. All the children in the welfare home know that it is said that the director manages several welfare homes and will only come forward to deal with related matters when a child in the welfare home dies. At other times, the director's personnel are not seen at all. "Don't be sad, it's not your fault, Steve." As soon as Dean Boone finished speaking, he saw the door of the emergency room open. A doctor in white clothes walked straight out and gestured to the dean to come and talk. "How is the situation?" Dean Boone stood up quickly, walked quickly to the doctor, and asked in a low voice. "Heavy blood loss, resuscitation is ineffective." The doctor and Dean Boone looked at each other and said, and then looked at the little fat man who was following him, "Send this child back, and then you stay to go through the procedures." "No, I don't want it. Let me take a look at him again. How could he die like this?" The little fat man who had always been anxious suddenly heard the news of Wayne's death. He suddenly became excited and got up and ran towards the emergency room. But before he could reach the door, the stinging sensation in his head suddenly burst out, causing the little fat man to fall limply outside the door of the emergency room and lose consciousness. Where is this place? Wayne slowly opened his eyes and saw a white roof. After waking up for a few seconds, Wayne stood up suddenly and looked down at his chest, which was intact. In disbelief, Wayne reached out and touched the spot where he was shot in his memory. There was a trace of confusion in Wayne's eyes. He clearly remembered that he had been shot, so how could he not have any wounds? When Wayne was troubled, the door of the ward was pushed open, and Principal Boone and a doctor came over. "How do you feel, Wayne?" Dean Boone looked at the confused Wayne and asked with a smile. "Dean, why are you here? I seem to have had a dream just now." Wayne was surprised when he saw the Dean, and then scratched his head. The conflict between memory and reality made him confused. "Do you think that was a dream?" Boone walked to Wayne's bed and sat down, looking at the confused Wayne with a smile. Frowning, Wayne also couldn't figure it out. If it was a dream, it would be too real, but if it wasn't a dream, what about the wounds on his body? As if seeing Wayne's doubts, Boone continued with his standard smile. "Do you know mutants exist?" Mutant. Wayne was surprised when he heard Boone's words, and instantly understood what he meant. Am I a mutant? Although he has always known about the existence of mutants and has not ruled out mutants, Wayne never thought that one day he would become a member of the mutants. "Obviously, you were shot yesterday, but now look at your chest." Boone pointed to Wayne's smooth chest and continued in a slower tone. "But don't be afraid, Wayne, mutants are also members of the human race, and we will not exclude you." Obviously, Boone is worried that Wayne will not be able to accept the fact that in the mainstream values of today's society, mutants are not accepted by the general public, so most people still have a resistance to the existence of mutants. "Afraid? Haha, I'm not afraid." After the identity of the mutant was confirmed, Wayne did not show any fear or unacceptable emotions. Instead, he became excited. He looked at his body with a look of surprise, and Boone's eyes were as fiery as if he were looking at his first love. The corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily, and the standard smile finally showed a flaw. As long as you don't mind being a mutant, now we need to take you to a special place to help you better master your abilities." After being stunned for a few seconds, Boone said awkwardly to Wayne on the bed. Then he stood up, leaned close to the doctor next to him and whispered in the ear, "I'll leave him to you, Francesca. His ability to awaken is similar to that of Wolverine, which is just right for your research. Remember to inject 20 doses of sedation on the way, Agent." Wayne did not notice the conversation between the Dean and the doctor at this time. He was concentrating on feeling the changes brought about by the awakening of his powers. He touched the place where he had been shot before. His skin was as smooth as a newborn baby's. After awakening his superpower, Wayne's whole body seemed to be reborn. Not only did all the scars on his body disappear, but his skin became smoother and his muscle lines became more perfect. In addition, Wayne found that his vision became clearer, and he could clearly see a thumb-sized gecko lying on the wall 10 meters away. Clenching his fist, Wayne felt that there was amazing power in his body. Just when Wayne was surprised by his own changes, the doctor came over with an injection and said to Wayne, "Don't move, let's take an injection first." Wayne obediently stretched out his hand and walked towards the hospital. He asked, "Where's Steven?" "Steven saw you were injured and was stimulated. He has been sent back to the orphanage." "Don't worry." Dean Boone comforted Wayne with a smile. "You'd better feel your awakening ability more. The special place you mentioned is something like." As Wayne spoke, he suddenly felt his thinking slowing down, and then he fell into coma again. On the deserted street, a young man wearing a white hospital gown was looking around curiously. "Where is this?" Wayne looked at his surroundings as he walked. There was a long street about 10 meters wide, with shops that had closed on both sides. He was the only one left on the empty street. "Boy!" Suddenly a man's voice came from behind Wayne. Wayne turned around subconsciously and immediately discovered that the source of the voice was the short man who shot him. Subconsciously looking at the hands of the short thief, Wayne happened to see the thief raise the pistol in his right hand again, bang. With a scream, Wayne suddenly opened his eyes and looked around. He was still lying on a hospital bed, but the surrounding environment was obviously not a hospital. After touching his somewhat groggy head, Wayne began to carefully observe the surrounding environment. "Is this a special place?" Wayne barely managed to sit up. He didn't know what kind of medicine was injected into him. Wayne felt that he might not be able to beat a newborn baby. His whole body looked like a soft slug. After looking at it for a while, Wayne found that he was in a vast hall. Under the dim light, he could see that the surrounding walls were all unpainted earthen walls, as if they were a military factory from the last century. Shelves and instruments similar to operating tables were neatly arranged on both sides of the hall. A woman with spikes on her back was being examined by a doctor on one of the operating tables. There was a similar hospital bed next to Wayne, and a man with a pale face and blue lips was lying on it. He had his eyes closed and he didn't know if he was in a coma. Far away, a man with red eyes was struggling hard, but his hands and feet were firmly tied. All efforts were in vain, and he could only be pushed to the back of the hall unwillingly. From the blocked area in the second half of the hall, a somewhat intrusive scream or roar could be heard from time to time. "What the hell is this place, Boone?" Wayne muttered to himself. At this time, no matter how generous Wayne was, he realized that this was obviously not a place to help mutants control their abilities. This is obviously the home base of those perverted scientists who experimented on human bodies in the movie. As if he heard Wayne's mumbling, the man with closed eyes next to Wayne suddenly raised his head and looked towards Wayne. Only then did Wayne have the opportunity to carefully observe the man's appearance. He saw that the man on the hospital bed was about 30 years old and had a thin beard. However, his face was sickly pale and his eyes were deeply sunken, as if suffering from a terminal illness. While Wayne was sizing up the man was also sizing up Wayne. "Little handsome boy, what is your name and where does it come from?" the man asked first. "Ah, my name is Wayne. I'm from New York. Are you a mutant too? What is this place? Why does it look like the set of The Walking Dead?" Seeing the man break the deadlock, Wayne suppressed his uneasiness and asked the man. "My name is Wade. Yes, I am also a mutant, and my superpower is cancer." After hearing Wayne's words, Wade's sick face showed a sarcastic smile. "As for where this place is, you can wait for a while, just know it." "What the hell is this place?" Seeing that Wade had given up, Wayne frowned and continued to ask. "Let me tell you." At this moment, a man and a woman came from a distance and interrupted the communication between the two. Wayne turned around and squinted his eyes, and found that the man among them was the doctor next to Dean Boone in the hospital that day. Another unknown woman walked directly to Wayne, reached out her hand and roughly pushed Wayne back onto the hospital bed, and then skillfully tied Wayne's hands and feet. "Haha, this is a familiar scene. Your binding skills are still so superb. Do you often practice on your dad?" Seeing Wayne being tied up in shame, Wade smiled exaggeratedly and said to the woman who tied up Wayne. The woman turned her attention to Wade and said nothing, but Wayne could clearly feel her anger. He used his hands on the thin leather belt to exert force. Ignoring Wayne's cries of pain, the woman turned and walked towards Wade. Next to the bed, he stretched out his hand and dragged Wade's bed towards the back of the hall. "I'll take him over there to calm down. Go and entertain our talkative gentleman." The man dressed as a doctor responded with a smile, then looked at Wayne who was tied to the bed and struggling and said, "Give up, poor child, let me tell you the truth. Do you think the orphanage you grew up in is really just an ordinary orphanage?" Seeing that Wayne stopped struggling, the man continued. "From the day you entered the orphanage, your fate was destined. The orphanage only exists to help us collect ordinary people with potential X genes. Do you know why the rules of the orphanage are so unreasonable? It is to create more conflicts between you. Intense emotions can increase the probability of activating the X gene, especially death." The man continued to explain to Wayne the reasons for various abnormal behaviors in the orphanage in a sinister tone. "What about those who didn't activate or reach the age and left?" Wayne stared at the man's cold eyes and suddenly asked. "The little fat boy will be old enough to leave the orphanage in a few months, and the so-called X gene has not been activated." Wayne still has a trace of fantasy in his heart, hoping that this evil organization can let the little fat boy live. Although those wastes have not awakened, they can still serve as experimental subjects for our other research." Facing Wayne's question, the man's expressionless face revealed a perverted smile, just like the perverted scientist in the movies Wayne watched when he was a child. The man's words also solved Wayne's long-standing questions about why the orphanage enacted some strange rules and why people who left the orphanage never came back to visit their former friends. You scum. Looking at the perverted doctor in front of him, Wayne suddenly felt that the iron bed under him was as cold as Antarctic ice. The cold air penetrated his body and froze all the way to his heart. Over the years, Wayne has silently thanked the orphanage countless times for allowing himself and other orphans to survive in this indifferent society and becoming a source of support for these lonely children. Although many of the rules in the orphanage are cruel, as orphans they understand better than ordinary people that if you want to get something, you need to give something. There are more people in the world living hundreds of times more difficult lives than they do. Over the years, Wei En has already regarded the orphanage as her home. However, the cruel reality made Wayne realize that the place he had always regarded as home was actually a slaughterhouse, and they became the livestock in the slaughterhouse, and the welfare institution that they used as their protection had the purpose of raising them, just to satisfy their own evil purposes. Without giving Wayne any more time to think, after the man finished speaking, he dragged Wayne's hospital bed to the back of the hall. After passing through the hall, Wayne realized that compared with the scene behind him, the hall just now was already very harmonious. This is the real hell. Tortured humans or mutants were everywhere, and wailing and screaming filled the entire space. There are all kinds of tools that make people feel creepy at a glance. It seems that all the torture methods imaginable by humans can be found here. Wayne began to try to struggle, but Wayne, who had been injected with drugs, was already weakened to the extreme. 2 leather ropes could already tie Wayne tightly at this time. Francis dragged Wayne to a wall, lifted Wayne with one hand, and fixed Wayne to the wall with a leather sheath. Then he took out a silver desert eagle from behind and pointed at Wayne's head. A strange light began to bloom in his eyes. It is said that your body has a self-healing factor, so let's test your limits. Pressing the gun down, the man shot Wayne directly in the heart. Looking at the 30C silver pistol that was no more than a distance from his heart, Wayne subconsciously tensed up his body. The clothes behind his back were instantly wet with cold sweat. With his high concentration, he could even clearly find that the hand of the man holding the gun in front of him was because of the cold sweat. Excited and slightly trembling, there was a bang sound. The bullet shot into Wayne's heart quickly, and a sharp pain came. Wayne subconsciously focused on the injured heart. Wayne could clearly feel that as he concentrated his attention, a stream of heat in his body quickly converged on the injured area. With the influx of heat, the intense pain began to quickly ease. Bang! In less than 3 seconds, the bullet was squeezed out of Wayne's body, and the wound began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ha! A few more rounds. Are these bullets expired? You are not so poor that you can't afford genuine bullets, are you, you fool? After sweating profusely, Wayne calmed down his rapid breathing and spat at the man not far away. Although the severe pain only lasted less than 3 seconds, the feeling of being focused on his heart was not pleasant. Although Wayne could still shout loudly at this moment, his slightly trembling fingers still exposed Wayne's fear. Not bad, not bad. It seems that your recovery ability has surpassed that of the famous Wolverine. You are truly a perfect test subject. Ignoring the roaring Wayne, the man looked at Wayne with a fervent expression after a brief silence and said, "Let's try something else." After saying that, the man lowered Wayne from the wall and fixed him on the hospital bed, then walked to the freezing room. The so-called freezer is a room filled with many large freezers. "Hey, Wayne, I'm here, are you here to have an ice spa with me?" Wade was trembling as he was immersed in a freezer full of ice cubes. Suddenly he saw Wayne being dragged in, and he suddenly became energetic. The happy expression was as if he was having a hot spring sap, not cosplaying a human popsicle here. Wayne, who was lying on the iron bed waiting for the next wave of torture, suddenly heard a familiar voice. He subconsciously looked up and saw that Wade, with a green face, was soaking in a freezer and shouting to him. "Yes, I enjoy the distinguished VIP membership level treatment, but the waiter behind me is a bit ugly." After Wayne was stunned for a moment, he understood God's cooperation and said, "PFF." Before he could finish his words, Wayne threw it into one of the freezers. "Look, I'm not lying to you. I don't even need to come in by myself. It's a complete VIP service." Wayne couldn't help but shiver when his warm body suddenly came into contact with the biting ice, but he didn't show it. Instead, Scholar Wade pretended to be comfortable and said to the gloomy-looking man, "I'm starting to like you, handsome boy. Help me upgrade my membership level. You can't be partial, Francis." Glancing at Wayne next to him in surprise, Wade suddenly felt that this new kid was very compatible with him. "Shut up, you two losers." The man who sent Wayne in, Francis, looked at the two people in front of him sitting in the freezer with expressions of enjoyment and roared. Francis was a little angry that a torture method was used as a party by two weirdos. In order to stop hearing nonsense, Francis closed the doors of the two freezers. "Did you like the ice bath yesterday, Wade?" Gina came over with a match in her mouth, looked at Wade who was paler than yesterday and asked, and then looked at Wayne who was next to him with a rosy face. Their faces formed a sharp contrast. "I heard you had a good chat yesterday." Gina was the woman who tied up Wayne. Yesterday, after Francis closed the cabinet door, the biting ice water immediately surrounded Wayne's entire body, but before Wayne could scream, a wave of heat appeared in his body and quickly covered Wayne's body. The emergence of heat flow makes the freezer in Wayne feel better. No matter where there is frostbite, the heat flow will arrive in time. But for Wade, being put into the freezer was real torture. After all, his cancer ability could not help him resist the cold, but would make him even weaker. "Not bad, are you imitating Stallone with the match in your mouth?" Wayne looked worriedly at Wade, who was still shivering, and took the initiative to speak to Gina. "I know him too. He lives next door to me. How about you let me out and I let him be your father?" Another talkative one. "Let's see your limits today." Gina glanced at Wayne in surprise. Very few people who came here and experienced torture could still continue to be as broken-mouthed as Wayne and Wade. After all, the various tortures here can easily make a normal person mentally alert, collapse. Ignoring all of Wayne's trash talk, Gina dragged Wayne's bed towards the back of the hall. After walking through the hall, Wayne discovered that today he was not taken to the two places yesterday. Instead, he came to an empty small room. In the center of the room was a large metal machine that had been burned beyond recognition. On the bed, Francis was sitting next to the wall holding a can of gasoline and looking at him indifferently as he was dragged in. Gina skillfully fixed Wayne on the metal bed. Yesterday, they had seen Wayne's ability to recover and resist freezing after being shot. Now that we have a general understanding of Wayne's recovery ability, today we are going to use other methods to gain a more comprehensive understanding of his ability. The moment Wayne was fixed, Francis walked up quickly and did not give Wayne a chance to open his disgusting mouth. Francis directly poured gasoline on Wayne from head to toe, and then Gina spat out her mouth. He gently drew the match on his fingernail, and threw the lit match on Wayne's body. The flames covered Wayne's body in an instant. Wayne, who had just opened his mouth, saw the oncoming gasoline, and cleverly closed his mouth to prevent the oil from entering his mouth. However, the next moment, Wayne felt as if he had been put into an oven. The dough, the excessively high temperature made its skin look like dried bread, and it began to crack inch by inch until it was burnt black. The huge pain caused by the flames burning his whole body made Wayne couldn't help but scream out. At this time, the self-healing factor in his body rushed to the fire scene in time like a dedicated firefighter, scorching the skin wherever he went. Everything was reborn, and the pain caused by the flames and the itching sensation caused by the new skin growth made Wayne's body involuntarily start to twitch like a ghost. 5 minutes later, the flames all over Wayne's body had been extinguished, and the barrel of oil had finally burned out. Wayne lay helplessly on the big metal bed, with no trace of injury visible on his body, and the newly grown skin was as clean as just took a shower. Taking a long breath and looking at Francis and Gina walking slowly towards them, Wayne no longer had the energy to continue taunting him. When he was just surrounded by flames, Wayne only felt like countless ants were crawling all over his body, burning. Wayne was tortured by the pain and the new itching of his skin. Burns can also be healed quickly, so you can move on to the next item. Looking at Wayne who was unharmed, Francis was recording something in his notebook like a scientist. After a while, he raised his head and gave instructions to Gina beside him. During this day, Wayne underwent tests such as being burned, chopped with an axe, and injected with viruses. These methods did not leave a trace on his body. However, the pain caused by the experiment caused Wayne to suffer. Unlike ordinary people, Wayne's strong recovery ability made it difficult for him to fall into a coma, and he could only endure every torture. But this was not what saddened Wayne the most. What was most difficult for him to accept was that after being burned by the fire, although his body returned to its original shape, all the hair on his body had been wiped out along with his hospital clothes. The original short blonde hair has turned into a bare egg, which can still reflect dazzling light under the light. For Wayne, who has considered himself a handsome man since he was a child, this is as uncomfortable as killing him. It has been confirmed that his vitality is very strong. Let's report to the organization and start extracting his genes for research tomorrow. Let's use our Mr. Talkative as the first experimental subject. Ignoring Wayne's angry gaze, after testing the last item, Francis wiped the stains on his hands with a towel and said to Gina. Hall, when they are not being dragged into torture, most people who are still mentally sane will be more eager to communicate more with similar people. After all, they face all kinds of inhuman torture every day. Only the comfort of similar people and expectations for the future can keep them. Have the courage to face the next day. Wayne, I heard that you did all the healthcare projects for me today. Wade, who had regained some energy, said gratefully to Wayne, who was looking at the roof in a daze. Yes, Francis, if there is a chance to reverse roles, I will definitely ask him to experience it. Wayne stared at the ceiling and said feebly. The day's torture had made him mentally exhausted. No matter how powerful his recovery power was, he could not recover from his mental fatigue. Do you think we can have a chance to escape? After a while, Wayne withdrew his gaze, turned his head to look at Wayne next to him and asked with a hint of doubt. Of course, when my cancer is cured, I will go back to see my Vanessa. She is a beauty. Then I will take you to see everything. You will definitely be seen in Margaret's sister's bar with your appearance. Very popular. Speaking of Vanessa, Wade's overall mental state seemed to be better again. Vanessa is Wade's spiritual support, and Wade has to mention it to Wayne at least 50 times a day. Okay, let me tell you some bad news. They may use you for experiments in a while, using my genes. Ha, I didn't expect to have a son for no reason. After resting for a long time, Wayne finally recovered. Thinking of Francis's plan to use his genes to experiment on Wade, he couldn't help but laugh. If Wade had his genes in his body, wouldn't it be the same as his son? I thought I could have such an unexpected gain this time. You accidentally injured a friendly force, Wayne. Do you think your genes can help me cure cancer? Staring hard at Wayne, who was still snickering, Wade's eyes were also a little confused. Of course, Wade knew that this organization was not a charity rescue organization. These people did various experiments just to achieve the purpose of the organization, but Wayne's miraculous recovery ability still made Wade couldn't help but have a little fantasy about the miracles that might happen. It would be great if there was hope that he could be cured of his cancer. Vanessa might be looking for him everywhere now, Wayne couldn't help but think. I hope, if I can escape, I will uproot them. Wayne clenched his fists and suddenly felt a sense of emptiness in his body. He sighed helplessly and slowly fell into a deep sleep. 1 month after Wayne's genes were extracted. During this period, Francis has been conducting various research and experiments on Wayne's genes. He has not made substantial progress for too long, and some people in the organization have criticized him. The emergence of Wayne's genes allowed Francis to see the dawn of success. He was eager to prove his ability to the organization through a successful experiment. This eagerness also made him even more irritable. Wayne and Wade's lovely mouths have made them receive special care from Francis in the past month. Francis has fully demonstrated his talent for tormenting people on them, using all kinds of strange torture methods on both of them. It was used on people. I'll give you the last 3 days, Francis. If you still don't get results, I'm afraid the organization will have to re-evaluate your abilities. Okay, I will speed up the research. Francis hung up the phone with a gloomy face and said to Gina next to him. Fake, Gina, we can't delay it any longer, we need to conduct research directly with living bodies. After saying that, he walked into the simple hall first, took a quick look, found the bald head reflecting the light under the light, and walked over. At this time, Wayne and Wade were lying on the iron bed with their eyes closed. This month of endless torture had brought their spirits to the edge of collapse. Especially Wade, who was suffering from cancer and did not receive effective treatment. Instead, he he was frequently abused, which made his physical condition even worse than his mental condition. From his black lips and pimples, his bloodshot eyes could tell that he didn't have much time left. Wayne had some unexpected gains during this month of torture. When he first woke up, Wayne needed to focus on the injured area to speed up his body's recovery. After a long period of torture, Wayne's body seemed to have formed a conditioned reflex. As long as he was injured, the self-healing factor would automatically start to repair. Wade, who was resting after the closing ceremony, suddenly felt himself moving and opened his eyes with difficulty, just in time to see Francis dragging his bed with a sullen face. "Hey, your face looks like you've eaten shit." Wade's voice was hoarse, and whenever he opened his mouth, he felt as if his throat was being cut by a sharp blade. His deteriorating health made him a little desperate. Sometimes he felt that he might die in this dirty corner and never see his Vanessa again. Now he just wants to take revenge on the murderer who caused all this. Even if these words will make him suffer more torture, for a person who is about to die, what else is there to be afraid of? However, Francis ignored the somewhat crazy Wade and put him directly into a transparent space capsule-like device. Looking at Wade inside, Francis whispered into Wade's ear. "We'll wait until you survive this time, but I really hope you survive so I can continue to torture you." Gina, who had been waiting nearby, took out the prepared injection and plunged it into Wade's arm. Then she closed the outer glass cover and clicked the buttons on the instrument a few times. Wade instantly felt that the oxygen content in the air was continuously decreasing. His chest seemed to be pressed by a big stone. His limbs struggled weakly for a few times. He took a few hard breaths, but no new oxygen entered his body. As the oxygen content in his body became lower and lower, his consciousness was slowly stripped away. As if a century had passed, the glass cover was opened again. Wade took a few big gulps of air greedily, and then saw Francis's disgusting face appearing in front of him. It was obvious that Francis was a little confused at this time. Excited. "Are you happy, Wade? I cured your cancer and there were no side effects." Francis's words made Wade temporarily forget to speak, and he felt the condition of his body carefully. Although he had just been tortured to death, his physical condition at this time was better than ever. Ever since he was diagnosed with cancer, Wade has suffered from cancer cells. The torture, but now, he felt like his body was reborn. "Do you want to thank me?" "Actually, I don't think you need to. After all, only if you survive can our game last longer." Seeing Wade's originally pale face gradually turn rosy, Francis showed a cruel smile, turned to Gina and said, "Continue." Although the experiment has yielded results, Francis is not ready to give up torturing Wade. He wants to see how long this man's mouth can last. As usual, Gina leaned down to check whether the shackles inside the instrument were firm. "Enjoy it, Wade, you still have a lot of good days ahead of you." Taking advantage of the moment when Gina lowered her head, Wayne, who had been silent, suddenly raised his head and hit Gina hard in the face. The sudden attack knocked Gina back 2 steps, and the match in her mouth was gone. Trace. After reacting, Gina angrily wanted to go up and teach Wade a lesson, but as soon as she took 2 steps, she was stopped by Francis beside her. "Don't be like this, Gina, just think that we owe him, you go first, I will do it." Stopping Gina, who wanted to teach Wade a lesson, Francis closed the glass cover and opened the pressure valve to the maximum. Looking at Francis slowly walking away, Wade raised his head slightly, opened his mouth, spit out a match into his hand, lit the match with his fingernail, and then threw the match into the oxygen port. Boom. Francis just took a sip of coffee and was about to take a break when he suddenly heard a loud noise, and then felt the whole building shake violently. Not knowing what happened, he hurriedly headed upstairs before he could put on his shirt. Rush down. By the time Francis arrived at the hall, the entire hall on the first floor had been covered in flames, with broken instruments and wailing test subjects lying on the ground everywhere. Looking at the messy hall, Francis cursed, picked up a fire extinguisher and started trying to put out the fire on the first floor. After walking a few steps, he was suddenly shocked. In front of him, the glass cover of the instrument that tortured Wade had been smashed, and Wade, who was supposed to be lying inside, was gone. Puff. At the same time as he saw the glass cover shattering, Francis was suddenly hit in the head by something, and his body hit the ground with huge force. Francis, whose reaction ability had been enhanced, sensed danger and immediately somersaulted away from his previous position. When he turned around, he saw Wade rushing out of the fire. Looking at Francis, who fell to the ground, Wade did not continue to talk nonsense this time, but rushed directly towards Francis, like a crazy bison, lifted Francis with both hands, hit the wall pillar behind, and was already burned by the flames. Half of the wall columns collapsed instantly. When Wade was hit by the collapsed pillar, Francis advanced instead of retreating. He stepped forward and hooked Wade's neck with his strong right arm, swung it hard, and then punched Wade in the head. While beating Wade, he hit Wade in the stomach with a flying kick and kicked him away. Puff. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Wade tried to struggle to stand up, but the feeling of weakness in his body made him feel as if he was suffering from cancer again. Although he had successfully escaped from the instrument with the explosion just now, but at close range, the explosion made Wade's condition not very good. Watching Francis pick up a steel bar on the ground and walk towards him, Wade crawled to the side with some difficulty. Sang easily caught up with Wade, who was squirming on the ground. Francis forcefully inserted the steel bar into Wade's back, and the powerful force directly penetrated the floor, directly fixing Wade to the floor. This attack completely dissipated the little strength Wade had just gathered. On the other side, while Wade was creating an explosion, Wayne, who was sleeping in bed, suddenly heard a loud noise. Before he could react, his whole body and the bed were instantly overturned to the ground. Looking at the messy hall and the smell like barbecue wafting from the back, Wayne was about to see what was going on. Suddenly he glanced and saw one of the glass pieces of the tranquilizer medicine that had just been shattered in the explosion, lying quietly on his right side. Ignoring the commotion, Wayne leaned down to pick up the piece of glass before Francis's attention was drawn, and with some difficulty began to cut the belt on his hand. 5 minutes later, as the belt binding his right foot was cut, Wayne finally regained his freedom. Feeling that his hands and feet were a little weak, Wayne did not run around like the others, but quietly moved into the hall by using various overturned instruments and beds. Where did Wade go? Arriving at the back of the hall and looking at the laboratory in flames, Wayne gritted his teeth impatiently. In memory, Wade should be being tortured at the back of the hall at this time. Just when Wayne was about to continue searching in depth, he suddenly sensed movement behind him. He wanted to dodge sideways, but his weak body prevented Wayne's reaction from keeping up with his thinking. Boom! Wayne hit the wall in front of him heavily and touched the blood flowing from his nose. Wayne turned his head and saw Gina behind him. Seeing Gina, Wayne's head felt hot, and he stood up and rushed towards Gina, regardless of the bursts of weakness in his body. This period of torture made Wayne's hatred for Francis and Gina difficult to describe in words. Looking at Wayne rushing toward her, Gina leisurely took out a match and put it in her mouth. Then she reached out and easily caught Wayne's fist, and then twisted it hard. Crack! Wayne's left hand was instantly crushed by Gina, but Gina's attack did not stop. She took hold of Wayne's severed hand, pulled it in, raised her knee and hit Wayne's unprepared chest. The sharp attack directly knocked the hot-headed Wayne to the ground. Looking at Wayne, who was unable to resist on the ground, Gina stretched out her hand to drag one of Wayne's feet and walked into the hall. Wade. When he heard someone calling his name, Wade raised his head with difficulty and saw Wayne lying on the ground looking at him. "I'm sorry, I probably can't take you out, Wayne." Wade smiled bitterly, vomited out a mouthful of blood, and said weakly, "You just wait here to die, Wade. But his value is still there, and he can't stay here with you anymore. Please say goodbye properly." Francis smiled and crossed over to Wade, interrupting Wade's words, and signaled Gina, who had arrived, to pick up Wayne on the ground and run out the door. The explosion and fire in the factory have attracted the attention of nearby people, and Francis needs to take Wayne away to the next prepared experimental base to continue his research. As for Wade letting him stay here to die, Francis didn't care about their life or death for worthless experiments. Beep, beep, beep. Half an hour later, several belated police cars arrived at the entrance of the warehouse with flashing red and blue lights and a piercing siren. "John, Ross, follow me inside and take a look. Others are surrounding this place." An old white-haired man dressed as a police sergeant got out of the car first. After greeting the two young police officers behind him, he clenched the pistol in his hand, bent slightly, and walked toward the warehouse with some caution. After looking at the broken chains in front of him, the old police chief reached out and pushed open the factory door. Vomit. As soon as the factory door opened a crack, the police sergeant couldn't help but retched. The young police officer behind him followed the captain's line of sight and saw that the warehouse was filled with burnt corpses and various damaged equipment remains. There are only a few small windows in the entire warehouse, which makes the ventilation capacity of the warehouse very poor. The smoke generated after burning and the smell of burnt corpses have been sealed in the warehouse. As the smell from the warehouse gradually drifted out, the two young police officers behind the old chief were even more miserable than the old chief. They held on to the wall next to them and bent down to vomit. In desperation, the old police chief could only hold his breath, completely open the factory door, and instruct everyone to stay away from the door temporarily. After letting the air circulate for a few minutes, he ordered everyone to go in together. "Oh my God, how many people have died?" After entering the factory, the old police chief exclaimed in surprise. In his decades as a police officer, he had never seen so many bodies at a crime scene at the same time. Only a few minutes after he came in, he saw no fewer than 30 corpses that were so burnt that their appearance and gender could no longer be distinguished. "What is this for?" John reached out and touched a slightly bent steel bar in front of him. No bodies were found around this area, but there was a strange steel bar standing there. "Leave the place alone, John." The old sheriff glared at John from behind, then picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "Seal down the scene and close the team. We need to report this to our superiors." At this time, these police officers did not notice that directly above them, in the cloudless blue sky, a private plane was flying across the sky. In the private plane, Wayne was lazily leaning on the last row of the private plane in a worn-out hospital gown. The scars from the previous fight and the arm broken by Gina were already intact. The sunlight coming through the window was a bit dazzling, making Wayne's eyes blurred involuntarily. A month of torture and a dim living environment almost made Wayne forget the color of the sun. Looking at the vast sky outside, Wayne felt slightly absent-minded. At the front of the plane, Gina was looking at her phone and said to Francis next to her, "Information came from the organization that the situation at the factory has been discovered by the local police and reported. Some people inside have begun to prepare to use this as an excuse to attack us." After the explosion that day, Francis and Gina decided to abandon the laboratory directly in order to avoid attracting the attention of the public and some departments. In order to destroy some evidence, Gina ordered the soldiers to lock the factory door with chains before leaving. Ignoring the temporary wailing of various patients in the factory, Gina hurriedly took Wayne into a black Chevrolet. After the car sped all the way to a private parking lot in the suburbs, without any time to repair, it took Wayne directly onto the already prepared plane. This unexpected explosion caused heavy losses to Francis. Regardless of the loss of research equipment and the exposure of the base, the death of a large number of experimental subjects and the possible troubles caused by the exposure of the laboratory have already caused dissatisfaction among some people within the organization. According to the information Gina received, someone within the organization was already preparing to put pressure on them. After all, there were many factions within the organization, and each faction wanted to obtain more resources. "I was indeed a little negligent, that fool." Speaking of this accident, Francis immediately thought of Wade who caused all this, and suddenly said with gritted teeth. Francis now regrets it very much. He feels that he let Wade die too easily. He should take that fool away with him and let him suffer endless torture. Francis rubbed his temples a little upset, looked back at Wayne who was slumped in the back row, and said to Gina, "As long as we can control Wayne, we will have a steady stream of genes for research. The Wolverine genes originally stored in the organization have long been used up, and now they can only beg us." At this time, Wayne's mind was wandering, but he couldn't help but think of Wade who was trapped at the fire scene, and of Wade's feeble but firm promise after the two of them had been tortured one day. "Hey, don't be like this, come and have a laugh, I will take you out, and then we will kill these perverts together." The gray-faced Wade turned sideways in the direction of Wayne and showed a smile that was uglier than crying. He looked at Wayne who buried his face in the quilt and said, "Although Wade not only has no powers but also suffers from cancer, Wade has been more calm than Wayne during the month of torture. Most of the time, Wade is the one who comforts the somewhat broken Wayne. However, Just when the hope of escape appeared in front of him, because of his own powerlessness, he actually let his brother die in front of him. Covering his red eyes, Wayne no longer had the desire to continue admiring the sky. If I could have provided Wade with some help at that time, maybe Wade would have been on his way to see Vanessa now. Wayne clenched his fists angrily, but as soon as he clenched his fists, Wayne was suddenly startled. Wayne looked at his hands in surprise at this feeling. Due to the long-term injection of large amounts of sedatives, Wayne had not experienced the feeling of full strength in his body for a long time. Feeling that his weak body was gradually filling up, Wayne finally remembered that during his hurried escape, Francis did not inject a sedative into his body on time. This means there is something you can do. Now is not the time to blame yourself. Wayne looked around at the situation in the plane. There were currently only 3 of him, Francis, and Gina on this private plane with a large interior space. The other soldiers were not sitting on the same plane with them. He looked at the barn door not far away from him and Francis and Gina, who were sitting in front, about 10 meters away from the barn door. Wayne began to close his eyes and focus. Although his self-healing factor was able to reflect automatically, Wayne found that when he concentrated, he accelerated the recovery of the area where he concentrated. Feeling the long-lost strength quickly return to his body, Wayne walked forward lightly. Boom! Francis and Gina, who were discussing their next plan, suddenly heard a loud noise behind them and subconsciously looked back. I saw Wayne, who was lying in the back row like a salted fish, now standing at the cracked doorway of the cabin with his fists raised and ready to strike. There was another loud bang, and the dying hatch was completely violently destroyed by Wayne. Feeling the freedom before his eyes, Wayne tilted his head and waved towards Francis, who looked surprised, and grinned. "Goodbye, dear Francis, I will come back to you." After saying that, without waiting for Francis and Gina to react, Wayne jumped towards the door, like a bird that had been locked in a cage for too long and couldn't wait to return to nature. Because the barn door was damaged, a huge suction force came from the outside. Francis and Gina, who were about to stand up to stop Wayne, quickly grabbed the handles beside them to prevent themselves from being swept out by the air pressure. They don't have strong recovery ability like Wayne. If he jumps, they will be dead, so Francis and Gina can only watch their most important experiment go away from his sight. Francis could no longer maintain his calm attitude when he first learned that the organization was preparing for accountability. Now that the only bargaining chip in his hand has escaped, if he is discovered by people from other factions in the organization, his fate will be self-evident. At this moment, the people in the cab also noticed the movement in the cabin and quickly activated the warehouse emergency measures. An inflatable mattress about the same size as the warehouse door suddenly appeared and blocked the gap in the warehouse door. After stabilizing his body, Francis found through the window that they had now flown to the Middle East. Below was either a desert or a mountain, and there was no possibility of landing on the spot. After being furious, Francis quickly calmed down, thought for a while and said to the driver, "Change direction, go to New York, he can't escape." The plane that was originally heading north turned around and flew in another direction in the air. At this moment, Wayne was like a meteorite falling from the sky, streaking across the sky. His escape plan was perfect, but Wayne ignored the process of jumping down from an altitude of 10,000 meters, the increasing speed and the strong air resistance. The flesh on Wayne's face was squeezed into a lump. Reluctantly opening his eyes, Wayne saw the desert getting closer and closer to him. Although he understood what he would face next, he still couldn't help but feel a little happy in his heart. He even wanted to dance in the sky. Celebrate. However, there was no time for Wayne to dance. Soon, Wayne had a close contact with the Earth at a speed of 447 meters per second. Boom! A big hole was made in the desert, and a lot of smoke and dust filled the air. Wayne was lying at the bottom of the big hole. At this time, his human form could no longer be seen, but if he looked carefully, he could see that countless tiny flesh buds were growing rapidly on his fallen body. On the other side, a bald Middle Eastern man was leading 2 very embarrassed-looking people out of the cave. He looked at the unknown objects falling like meteors in the distant sky and said to the soldiers holding guns not far away, "Go and see." Arabic. The 2 soldiers nodded without replying, picked up their guns, got into a nearby jeep, and drove towards the place where Wayne landed. Hiss. Wayne raised his head from the sand and moved his hands and feet. His limbs could move normally, but the organs inside his body still ached a little. The fall was so fast that Wayne lost consciousness before his pain nerves could react. Wayne had woken up a few minutes ago, and the superpower had repaired his brain first. When he woke up, he witnessed the magic of the superpower with his own eyes. In just a few minutes, his hand and broken body were shattered into pieces. The legs that had been broken into pieces have grown back. The body's recovery speed gave Wayne a better understanding of the strength of his powers. Although Wayne knew that his recovery ability was very strong, it now seemed that it was not only very strong, but that the speed was simply abnormal. Although he still doesn't know his own limit, there is probably, maybe, should, and definitely nothing in this world that can kill him. Wayne lay comfortably in the sandpit that perfectly fit his body shape, thinking with some pride. After being narcissistic for a while, Wayne finally remembered his current state, stood up from the sandpit, pulled off his torn shirt, and wrapped it around his waist to block his lower body. Looking at himself dressed like a primitive man, Wayne suddenly smiled. Then he raised his back, imitated the appearance of a gorilla and hammered his chest, then raised his right hand and slammed it hard against the sand wall next to him. Boom! The entire right arm was directly submerged into the sand. As early as when he was opening the door on the plane, Wayne had already discovered that his strength had improved somewhat. At that time, he just felt that his whole body was full of strength, so he tried to punch the hatch. Unexpectedly, the hatch was deformed. Before he could think about it, he immediately punched the hatch again and broke it. Only then can he successfully escape. Although he used to exercise regularly in the past, he did not have this kind of strength. Thinking of this, Wayne felt a little disappointed. If he had recovered earlier, maybe Wade wouldn't have died. Wade's death has always been a thorn in Wayne's heart. Although Wade was a bit mean-spirited, if it weren't for his comfort during that period, Wayne didn't know how he would have faced that period of hell. After calming down, Wayne was about to climb out of the sand pit when he heard the sound of a car engine coming from far away, and then a hat-wearing head stuck out from the edge of the hole. After seeing Wayne, he face-turned around in surprise and shouted to the back. "Here, there's someone here." Arabic. In the jeep, Wayne looked curiously at the man next to him who was on guard with a gun. He was wearing a shabby black cloth coat and a turban-like hat. He looked like he was dressed in the Middle East. "Where are you taking me?" Looking at the wary-looking soldiers, Wayne was a little amused. Could it be that he had been kidnapped by the legend? Even though he was dressed like a primitive man, someone actually kidnapped him. Seeing that the soldier was still looking at him warily, Wayne felt a little bored. Suddenly, Wayne bent down and put his face close to the machine gun held by the soldier. Ignoring the excited soldier who wanted to shoot, Wayne asked curiously, "What kind of gun is this?" All boys have a special love for firearms, and Wayne is naturally not surprised. This is the first time he has seen a real gun, and he can't help but get closer and take a closer look. Wayne didn't care at all about the soldier's violent reaction. He had eaten more bullets than salt in the past month, so he got into the car honestly. It's just that in this desolate desert, Wayne didn't feel that he could walk out on his own feet, and he didn't know that these ordinary people posed a threat to his recovered self, so he simply followed them to see if he could get out. "Can't find a way back." "Shut up." Arabic, the Middle Eastern man said, pointing the gun at Wayne's head. Hey, what are you talking about? Relax, don't be nervous." Wayne couldn't understand the language in the Middle East. Seeing the soldiers getting more and more excited, he quickly raised his hands to signal the man to relax. He hasn't seen anyone else yet, and Wayne doesn't want to conflict with them now. He still needs to rely on them to get home. The car drove all the way across the vast desert, and within a few minutes Wayne and the others arrived near a mountain range. After getting out of the car, two Middle Eastern soldiers held Wayne in the middle and walked towards the mountains. There is an artificially mined walkway in the middle of the mountain range. Boxes and shells are stacked on both sides of the road. From the gaps in some hidden boxes, you can see that they are full of neat bullets or guns. All the boxes and the word Stark Industries are clearly printed on the missiles. Every few steps there would be a heavily armed soldier on guard. Is this an arsenal or a base? Wayne observed carefully as he walked. The expressions of every soldier looking at him were very unfriendly. Some were indifferent, some were grinning, as if to say, "Look, another catch an unlucky guy." Wayne, who was placed in the middle, looked at the large amount of arms around him and was a little frightened. It wasn't because he was shocked by the strength of the soldiers, but because it was a bit unbelievable. From the perspective of the awakened Wayne, these soldiers were simply garbage, but these garbage could actually possess such huge weapons. As he walked, he came to a cave and looked away from the weapons around him. Wayne found 3 people standing among a group of Middle Eastern soldiers in front of him. There was a bald Middle Eastern man, a middle-aged American man wearing a black jacket and a mustache, and a slightly older man wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and a thin old man in a suit. The bald man was raising his head proudly, communicating with the American with the mustache and the little old man next to him, while directing the soldiers next to him to carry arms into the cave, with the words, "I am the boss," written on his face. Seeing Wayne and the others approaching, the bald man stopped communicating with the old man in a suit and walked over. "What's going on over there? Where does this guy come from? When we went over, we found a big hole in the ground, and this man was found in the hole." Arabic. The man to Wayne's left replied. Seeing the 2 Middle Easterners in front of him communicating with each other in incomprehensible bird language, Wayne suddenly became bored and his eyes began to wander from side to side again. "Hey, mustache, you look familiar." Suddenly, Wayne looked at the American with a beard, a look of doubt on his face. "Well, you speak English, are you American?" After hearing what Wayne said, Mustache, who was in a daze, looked at Wayne in surprise. Just when he was about to continue asking something, the bald man next to him suddenly pointed at Wayne and said to the soldier, "Kill him." Arabic. The soldier who had been driving Wayne immediately raised his gun and pointed it at Wayne beside him. "Stop and keep him. He can speak English and understand what I mean. With him, I can complete the weapon faster." Mustache excitedly ran between Wayne and the soldiers, blocking the muzzle of the gun pointed at Wayne, and looked at the little old man with glasses. Seeing Mustache's signal, the old man immediately translated Mustache's words to the bald man. The bald man glanced at the old man with some confusion, raised his hand to the soldier to signal him not to shoot, and turned to look at the mustache. "Okay, I believe you again, and I will give you 5 more days. I want to see to the finished product." Arabic. Take them in. Arabic. The bald man walked up to Wayne and pushed him hard, then ordered to the nearby soldiers. "Is this where you work? It's unlucky that you were captured." In the cave, Wayne looked at various old instruments with a leisurely expression and said to the 2 people next to him. "It's unlucky enough, but weren't you also arrested?" Mustache rolled his eyes, a little uncomfortable with Wayne's frivolous tone. "We are all arrested. If I am unlucky, aren't you unlucky? I wasn't captured. I can leave anytime I want. Hey, you look familiar to me." Wayne approached Mustache and observed Mustache's face seriously. He always felt that this face was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. "Oh, I know, you look a bit like Tony Stark." Suddenly Wayne's eyes lit up and he shouted excitedly. When he was in the orphanage, Tony Stark was the envy of many children. He became famous at a young age, has a net worth of tens of billions, has received various awards, and has slept with countless beauties. Ordinary people would be very satisfied as long as they have any of these, but all of these are concentrated in Tony Stark. In Wayne's view, Tony is simply the illegitimate son of Goddess Luck. "You are not his relative, are you?" Wayne hugged Mustache's shoulders enthusiastically and whispered in his ear. "Ha, you also know that Tony Stark heard that he is a genius, do you admire him very much?" Mustache's expression finally changed. He stopped what he was doing, and the corners of his mouth began to tilt up uncontrollably. Yes, he is my idol. Ha 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 ha, the young man has good taste." After hearing these words, Mustache finally couldn't help laughing, and the somewhat hateful kid in front of him finally became a little more pleasing to the eye. "I rescued you and asked him to help me open a hot pot restaurant. It shouldn't be too much." As if he thought of something, Wayne swallowed subconsciously. "What's hot pot? It's a weird name. Also, I'm not his relative, I'm Tony Stark." Seeing Wayne's adoring expression when he mentioned Tony, Mustache replied with a stern expression. "Hot pot is just, well." Wayne, who was about to explain what hot pot is, suddenly reacted. I carefully looked at the mustache next to me again. This was Tony Stark himself. No wonder he looked so similar, and there was indeed no news report that Tony had any older brothers. "And I don't need you to take me out. I'm Tony Stark. How can such a small cave contain the smartest man in the world? It was as if Wayne's admiration made Tony directly define him as one of his own. Without any hesitation, he led Wayne to a surveillance corner and took out a few blueprints from a pile of scrap metal. Look, we need to make this now, and then we can get out of this hellish place. With you joining us, we can do it faster. Yes, my old bones can hardly hold on anymore. Hello, my name is Ethan, from Gamilla. At this time, the little old man who had been unable to speak finally came over and stretched out his hand to Wayne. Hello, my name is Wayne and I'm from New York. Wayne looked at the drawings, shook hands with Ethan absently, and then said eagerly, "Then let's get to work." Although Wayne was confident that he could break out of the base intact, he could not guarantee that he could take two ordinary people out. Tony and Ethan were not able to ignore bullets like Wayne. "You'd better put on your clothes first. I don't like watching a man with half-clothed clothes dangling in front of me." Tony frowned and looked at Wayne's fig leaf, then turned around and took out a pair of old clothes and threw them to Wayne. Ding, ding, ding. Tony and Ethan were dumbfounded as they looked at Wayne, who was forging iron. Before starting work, the three of them divided the work. Tony was responsible for assembling, Ethan was responsible for dismantling, and Wayne volunteered to choose blacksmithing, which was to transform the old dismantled materials into the shape Tony needed. This step is the most physically demanding because there is no modern advanced equipment here and all steps need to be completed manually. Before Wayne came, Tony had to hammer a piece of alloy flat for more than 10 minutes, but Wayne came up with 3 hammers and smashed a piece of alloy the size of an arm into iron sheet. If it weren't for the limited area of the hammer that required Wayne to hammer 3 times to flatten all the alloy, I'm afraid Wayne only needed 1 hammer. I now somewhat believe you can go out on your own. Tony shook his head, stopped looking at Wayne's abnormal operations, and concentrated on assembling the parts. Are you really not considering investing in me to open a hot pot restaurant, Tony? Wayne looked at the wealthy Tony diligently while banging the iron. Let's talk about it when we go out. If it's really as delicious as you said, it's not impossible. Tony had a headache. Wayne had mentioned the hot pot restaurant to him countless times in the past 2 days, which made him look forward to hot pot. Actually, I think you can also invest in a barber shop. There is a barber shop near our orphanage with 5 Tonys. They are very skilled. I will ask them to help me style my hair when I get back. Wayne scratched his newly grown short hair. You shut up. Tony couldn't stand it anymore. After 2 days of getting along with him, he discovered that Wayne was good at everything except his mouth, which was like a machine gun with unlimited bullets, always clicking in your ears. Strike your iron. If you keep talking, your hot pot restaurant will be ruined. Ha, do you agree to the hot pot restaurant? Wayne said something in surprise, then raised his right hand and put his index finger in front of his mouth, making a shushing gesture towards Tony, signaling Tony to stop talking and that he was about to start working. Quote. Tony was speechless. Chapter 11. Follow the steps I taught you and help me set up the final energy program, Ethan. Tony sat in a huge steel armor and looked at Ethan, who was busy at the computer, and said, Hurry up, it's time for us to go home. It's almost done. Let me help you put on the last piece of armor. Ethan's tone was a little excited, and his usually steady hands were shaking slightly at this moment. Since Wayne joined, their progress has been greatly accelerated, but the Middle Easterners still noticed something was wrong, so the Middle Easterners advanced the delivery time. Today was the last day, and it was also the day he had dreamed of going home countless times in his dreams over the past few years. At this time, Wayne was standing at the door, looking outside through the small window of the door. Although he had not seen anyone yet, with his enhanced hearing, Wayne could hear the shouts ringing in the distance. Looking back at the 2 people who were still installing the armor, Wayne shook his head and sighed. How could 2 people of such an age be so uneasy? I'm going out for a walk. After shouting to Tony and Ethan, Wayne opened the door and walked out without waiting for their response. There was only one passage in the cave, and after just 2 steps, Wayne came to a corner and stopped, leaning against the wall. Superman's hearing allows Wayne to better determine the location of the soldiers in the Middle East. Wayne has heard 2 soldiers approaching him quietly and slowly. The Middle Eastern soldier walking in front had just turned the corner, and before he could see the road ahead clearly, a fist that was getting closer and closer to him appeared in his field of vision. Boom, sound. The soldier flew up uncontrollably, his head came into close contact with the wall behind him, and then exploded with a bang, like a smashed watermelon. Blood and brains flew everywhere, bringing up a thick cloud of dust. The soldiers walking behind were just about to be alert when they heard the movement in front, but were completely enveloped in the raised dust. However, the smoke and dust could not cover Wayne's eyes. After punching out, Wayne turned sideways and kicked another soldier in the stomach. The soldier was wiping his dust-covered eyes with his hands, and his last consciousness was a sharp pain in his abdomen. It seems like I used too much strength. Looking at the blood on the ground and the plasma on his hands, Wayne reached out his hand and wiped the soldier's clothes with some collapse. If he had known better, he would have held back his strength. Wayne looked at the blood stains on his hands that could not be wiped off and felt a little regretful. Suddenly, Wayne, who was struggling with the blood stains, saw the submachine gun dropped on the ground. His eyes lit up. He picked up the submachine gun from the ground and looked at it like a child who got a toy. Wow, that's really cool. Feeling the heavy weight on his hands, Wayne turned his face and made an iron-blooded look, and rushed forward, shouting as he rushed. Wayne the gunslinger is here, you trash. However, the next second, the submachine gunner stopped his charging pace. Behind the corner, there was a straight passage dozens of meters long. At the other end of the passage, a dozen soldiers with guns were watching in confusion as Wayne rushed out stupidly. Ahem, if I say this is a misunderstanding, would you believe it? Wayne put away the submachine gun in his hand with some embarrassment and tentatively asked the other side. Da 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 da. The soldiers responded with bullets in their hands. Facing the attack of bullets like raindrops, Wayne's new toy only lasted for 2 seconds before it was smashed into a sieve. He dropped the scrap metal in his hand. Wayne could only cover his eyes with both hands and run forward desperately, no matter what. The blood flowers of the Tao bloomed on his body and healed quickly. All help him. After putting on the last piece of armor, Ethan looked at Tony, who was temporarily unable to move, stood up and said something, then turned around and chased Wayne, who had just gone out. Come back and follow the plan. Tony, who was trapped in the armor, had red eyes and shouted to Ethan, who was walking away. He understood that the two people left one after another to help him buy time. He clenched his fists and Tony looked at the progress bar on the computer screen. Faster, faster. Ethan, who was chasing after him, did not see Wayne's figure. He only saw the bloody scene that Wayne had just created, which made Ethan, who was already a little nervous, look even paler. However, the fierce gunfire ahead made him overcome his psychological fear. Ethan picked up a gun full of blood from the ground and rushed forward firmly. Hang in there, Wayne. Ethan finally caught up from behind. Looking at Wayne, who was advancing with the bullet in hand, Ethan reacted immediately after a brief surprise, raised his gun and started shooting at the opposite side. Ethan's arrival helped relieve some of Wayne's pressure. Wayne jumped up with both feet, and his whole body smashed into the crowd on the opposite side like a cannonball. After closing the distance, Wayne was like a wolf that got into a herd of sheep. With super strength, in this kind of close encounter, ordinary soldiers couldn't stop Wayne at all. Drop. As the progress bar reached 100, Tony finally activated his armor and slowly came to the frontal battlefield with a slightly clumsy pace. Careful, Wayne. As soon as Tony arrived at the battlefield, he saw the bald man not far away holding a missile launcher at Wayne, who was fighting in the crowd. After reminding Wayne, Tony quickly controlled the armor, stretched out his left hand and pointed it at the bald head, and pressed the button on his left hand with his right hand. Boom! A missile shot out of Tony's armor in advance and hit the rock next to the bald head. Boom! Although it didn't hit the target directly, the collapsed rock still buried Baldhead's entire body inside. Wayne heard Tony's warning, turned around and punched the last soldier standing. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Ethan lying on the ground. What are you doing, Ethan? Wayne had no energy to deal with the blood all over his body, so he and Tony ran directly towards the fallen Ethan. I may not be able to go home with you, friends. Ethan coughed up a mouthful of blood, covered the hideous wound on his chest, and said to Wayne and Tony. Get up quickly, let's go according to the plan we agreed on. Come with me to meet your family. Tony opened the visor of his armor, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes. I can't leave, my family has died a long time ago, and I'm on my way to see them now. Ethan's voice became weaker, and the focus of his eyes was a little unfocused. It doesn't matter, I already knew this would happen. Thank you for saving us. Tony's voice was choked. Haha, let's go, don't waste this armor, Tony. After Ethan finished speaking, he looked at Wayne, who was silent, and said, Is this your ability, Wayne? It's so enviable. Looking at Ethan's eyes closing slowly, Wayne and Tony felt that they were filled with rage and had nowhere to vent. They looked at each other and walked towards the entrance of the cave together. At this time, there were already more than a dozen Middle Eastern soldiers outside the cave, standing guard with guns pointed at the entrance of the cave to guard against people or things that might come out of it. Boom, boom, boom. As the heavy footsteps got closer and closer, the soldiers outside the cave saw a figure covered with several strips of cloth rushing out with an iron armor several times larger than him in both hands. Da 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 da. For a moment, all the soldiers opened fire at the two people who appeared at the entrance of the cave. Wayne used Tony as a shield and hid behind the armor the moment he walked out. The power of the bullet was not enough to affect Tony's armor. Tony raised his hands and sprayed out 10 meters of flames from both hands, like two fire dragons spraying towards the soldiers outside. The soldier stopped firing and had some difficulty dodging the fire dragon shot by Tony. Taking advantage of the soldier's embarrassment to escape, Wayne jumped out from behind Tony like a monkey, rushed towards the fleeing soldier on the left, and launched another attack. A bloody killing. Come here, Wayne, there's going to be an explosion. Hearing Tony's cry, Wayne, who had just broken the fourth soldier's neck, ran decisively in Tony's direction. Hold me tight, he said to Wayne, who was coming over, and Tony pressed the red button on his left arm. Bang, was another violent explosion. The fire caused by the explosion rose into the sky, and a series of explosions destroyed the entire base. A whoosh sound broke through the air, and a silver-armored figure stepped out of the fire with flames under his feet. However, the propeller stopped working before it flew very far. What's the matter? Seeing that the thrusters stopped working, Wayne asked Tony in the armor. However, before he could finish speaking, the armor had already taken him down, leaving only Wayne in the sky. A scream of awe. In the endless desert, a figure with a naked buttocks and bloodstains on his body was holding a steel arm and twitching. Hey, can you hurry up? A somewhat impatient man's voice came from the armor. Then I'm going to use force, please bear with it. The naked figure replied. I saw the figure's bare buttocks, hugging the steel arm with both hands, lifting it with force, directly lifting all the armor that was half sunk in the sand, and then threw it aside like trash. The somewhat damaged armor fell apart after being thrown away like this. Tony struggled to open the iron mask covering his face, glanced at the white butt next to him, and looked like he had seen a ghost. Are you a pervert, Wayne? Well, I also think my abilities are very perverted, don't envy me too much. The naked Wayne didn't feel self-conscious at all. He was still facing Tony's face, and even showed a trace of pride on his face. I mean, you must use your little brother to talk to me. Tony covered his eyes with his hands, a little collapsed. After finally escaping, he could still accept it if a beautiful woman stood naked in front of him. But he had no interest in a naked man covered in blood. Wayne's proud expression froze, and he looked at Tony with some horror, and subconsciously covered the key parts with his hands. When he was shot indiscriminately in the first round, Wayne's clothes had been beaten into strips of cloth. When he escaped, the remaining strips of cloth had long since dissipated in the wind. Just now, Wayne was still immersed in the excitement of his first battle and didn't pay attention to his own situation. In a panic, Wayne ignored Tony's angry eyes, reached out and grabbed Tony's clothes, tore them off casually, tied them around his waist, pretended that nothing had happened, looked at the endless desert and asked, what to do next? Let's walk slowly. When the army's rescue arrives, we can go home. Tony tried his best, but still couldn't stand up. Hey, give me a hand and let's start our long journey. 2 hours later, I seemed to hear the sound of a helicopter. Wayne helped Tony stagger as he walked on the desert. As soon as they finished speaking, an armed helicopter appeared in their sight. The moment Tony, who needed support just now, saw the helicopter, he excitedly pushed away Wayne, who was supporting him, and ran while waving in the direction of the plane. I'm here, hey, this way. Wayne, who was pushed away, looked at Tony, who was being injected with blood, and suddenly felt his heart throbbing in pain. Are you lazy all this time? Wayne said with his green eyes, staring hard at Tony in front of him. The helicopter slowly flew toward them, and as if he felt something, Tony turned around and smiled at Wayne with a sly smile. Haha, why did your leg suddenly heal? Wayne raised his eyebrows and ignored Tony's explanation. He looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, waiting for the arrival of the helicopter with some sadness. After a while, the helicopter accurately stopped next to Tony. A black man in military uniform couldn't wait to jump out of the plane. He ignored Wayne next to him and went straight up to give the embarrassed Tony a bear hug. It's been a long time. No, brother, this is the first time I see you like this. It's nice to see you. Tony, who was being hugged, patted the black man on the back, then pointed at Wayne and introduced him to the black man. This is my savior. I am going to take him back to New York with us. The black man looked up and down at Wayne, who was covered in blood, and gave him a military salute. Without saying anything, he turned around and invited them directly to the helicopter. After taking the clothes handed over by the black man, Wayne thanked him and sat down quietly in the back row. Only then did Wayne think of the little fat boy who grew up with him, and couldn't help but worry about the little fat boy's safety. Wayne knew that Francis would never let him go so easily. Wayne didn't have many friends, and the only one who could threaten him was he as a fat man, and Francis will definitely make a fuss about the fat man to force himself to show up. Looking at his hands, Ethan's death made Wayne realize that although he had awakened his powers, the powers could not protect his friends. The lack of systematic fighting training makes him have huge strength, but he cannot display it perfectly. Like a baby holding a big knife, he can deal with some ordinary soldiers, but it may not be easy to deal with people in the research organization. Looking at Tony, who was bragging about how he escaped heroically, Wayne shook his head. It was better not to bother Tony. After all, he was just an ordinary person. After successfully bragging about himself, Tony lay on the backrest with some satisfaction. He looked back at Wayne, who was a little silent, and said thoughtfully, I will help you, don't worry. During the few days in the cave, Tony already knew all of Wayne's experiences, and he was smart enough to instantly understand the reason for Wayne's silence. Seeing Tony offering to help, Wayne was a little entangled and hesitant. He was really not sure of saving the little fat man on his own. I thought that living in an orphanage since childhood was the warmest time, but I found that the orphanage was just a cold slaughterhouse. On the contrary, in the dark time of being tortured and hijacked, the two people he met brought warmth to him. This is probably the window handle that God opens when he closes a door on himself. Thank you. Wayne closed his eyes, not letting Tony notice his wet eyes. Time goes back to 3 days ago. After fainting in the hospital, the little fat man was sent back to his dormitory by the dean. In the following days, the little fat man asked to see Wayne's body as soon as he got up every day, but was refused by the staff for various reasons. Today has been a month since Wayne was pronounced dead. The little fat man is lying on his bed, looking a little haggard. Over the past month, he has not only had to bear the pain caused by Wayne's death, but also faced the huge pressure from the revenge of Joseph's group made him collapse. Moreover, he discovered that his body seemed to have undergone some strange changes since the day he returned from the hospital. Bang bang bang, there was a knock on the door. The little fat man got off the bed and opened the bedroom door with some confusion. My condolences, Stephen, a boss said to the fat man who opened the door. Why are you here? Looking at a boss at the door, the little fat man was a little surprised. Except when receiving a job, no one wants to see a boss who has a straight face all day long. They usually don't have much interaction with a boss. A boss taking the initiative to come to him is like the sun coming out of the west. I'm sorry about Wayne, he's a good kid. A boss tone was a little unusual, and he said to himself, I once had a son who was about the same size as you. In his freshman year of high school, he encountered a robber while doing volunteer work, but he had bad luck. At that time no one among the onlookers helped him, they all watched him being beaten to death by the robbers. If a child like Wayne had existed at that time, maybe he would still be alive. Wiping the tears from the corners of his eyes, a boss moved closer to the little fat man and whispered in his ear, You go, the further away the better, it is not safe here, and Wayne is not dead. After saying that, a boss ignored the little fat man, and the lonely figure slowly walked away into the distance. Forcibly suppressing the surprise in his heart, the little fat man closed the door and walked out of the hospital pretending to be nonchalant. As he walked, he silently thought about the information a boss revealed to him. In fact, over the past month, the staff in the home had tried every means to prevent the little fat man from seeing Wayne's body, which had long made the little fat man a little suspicious. He had thought carefully about the strange things about the orphanage these days. First of all, deaths occur every year in welfare homes, but no one has ever seen the bodies of these people. Secondly, in the past few years in the orphanage, the little fat man has never seen any children who were kicked out after reaching the age to come back to visit their friends in the orphanage. Even if these people have no feelings for the orphanage, some of their friends are still in the orphanage. It is indeed strange not to come back for a visit in so many years. But no matter what, among the information revealed by a boss, the one that the little fat man is most concerned about is that Wayne is not dead. Then the first thing he needs to do next is to find Wayne's whereabouts. The little fat man walked faster and faster, and soon he reached the entrance of the orphanage. Just as he was about to go out, the security guard next to him came over and stopped the little fat man who wanted to go out. "Where are you going? There has been a lot of chaos outside recently. A child died not long ago. The dean only said after he came back last time that it is forbidden to go out." The little fat man was a little flustered when his thoughts were interrupted. He hesitated and was about to find a reason to persuade the security guard. "Robert, I asked him to go out and buy some repair tools that needed to be replenished." A boss came from behind sweating. After speaking to the security guard, he walked towards the little fat man and took out a wallet. "Hey, how can you buy something if you don't have a wallet? Go quickly." "Okay then." The security guard looked at the little fat man with some suspicion, but at Abbas's signal, he still withdrew his hand to stop the little fat man. Holding the wallet in his hand tightly, the little fat man did not dare to look back and accelerated his pace to leave. At this moment, the orphanage behind him seemed to have turned into a man-eating beast. After hurriedly walking through a block, the little fat man took a breath and opened the wallet a boss gave him. He saw that there were $1,000 and some change neatly placed in the wallet. Silently thanking a boss in his heart, the little fat man scratched his head and looked at the street with people coming and going, feeling a little at a loss. How should he find Wayne's whereabouts next? Unknowingly, the little fat man walked to the door of the authentic hot pot restaurant with his thoughts on his mind. Looking at the hot pot sign in front of him, the little fat man subconsciously opened the door and walked in. "Hey Steven, how's Wayne doing?" Wong, who was settling accounts in front of the computer at the checkout counter, looked up at the little fat man who had just come in and asked. After Wayne was shot that day, it was Wong who ran out of the store to call the police, but he never saw the little fat man and Wayne again. Pass. Facing Wang's inquiry, the little fat man replied with some frustration. "It should be fine, it's just." Halfway through, the little fat man paused. He didn't know whether he should tell Wong the truth or not. Sensing the little fat man's hesitation, Wong waved his hand. "It's okay. If it's not convenient, forget it. Do you want to eat something?" After taking a look at the computer next to Wong, the little fat man slowed down. "No, can I use the computer, Wong?" "Okay, I'm going to do my work first. If you need anything, just call me." Wong stood up and patted the little fat man on the shoulder, got up and walked into the store. Looking at Wang Yuan's back, the little fat man walked into the cashier and sat down directly in front of the computer. The moment he saw the computer, the little fat man felt that he had inexplicably felt a special affinity for the computer in front of him. It was as if he and the computer were of the same kind, and he could clearly feel the computer's emotions and communicate with it. This is a strange feeling that is difficult to describe. Although it sounds strange, there seems to be a voice in the subconscious saying to the little fat man that your feeling is right. Open Epsom Hospital's website. Following the feeling in his heart, the little fat man hesitated and whispered to the computer in front of him. The next second, the little fat man, who had taken his hands off the mouse and keyboard, suddenly saw the computer browser automatically opening, and the Epsom Hospital logo appeared on the monitor. He pinched the fat on his belly hard, and the pain in his belly made the little fat man realize that this was not a dream. Find Wayne's medical records. Realizing that his feelings had become reality, the little fat man continued to talk to the computer with some excitement, while imagining Wayne's appearance in his mind. As soon as he finished speaking, information about Wayne was displayed on the screen. Name: Wayne. Gender: male. Age: 15 years old. Reason for admission: gunshot. Cause of death: massive blood loss. As the little fat man's eyes moved downward, the pages on the computer began to automatically slide down following his eyes. Hey, there's no useful information at all. After browsing all the web pages, the little fat man suddenly sighed in frustration. The information on the website only records that Wayne was sent to the hospital that day, and all subsequent information is blank. Can't we find Wayne? The little fat man was a little desperate and held his face with his hands. Then, suddenly, the computer speaker made a sound. The little fat man subconsciously raised his head and looked in the direction of the computer. He saw that the website at this time was no longer the previous Epsom hospital. Instead, it turned into a website with a black background that I had never seen before. There was a small but extremely eye-catching logo in the lower right corner of the website, which looked like a skull with octopus tentacles. The following is recorded. Wayne is a tentative alpha-level mutant with the ability to self-recover. He was used in the X-weapon program jointly studied by the organization and the military. He escaped 3 days ago and his current whereabouts are unknown. When he saw the word, escape, the little fat man's eyes lit up. Since Wayne escaped, it proved that he was indeed not dead, and he also successfully escaped from some laboratory. King, I'm leaving now. I'll come back next time. After closing the website, the little fat man smiled and waved to Wong in the distance. Compared with before, the little fat man's mood was obviously higher. Okay, if you need my help with anything, just ask. Seeing the little fat man's cheerful appearance again, Wong also breathed a sigh of relief. He really didn't want anything to happen to the child he had watched since childhood. After leaving the hot pot restaurant, the little fat man began to calm down and carefully feel his connection with the outside world. The next moment, the originally noisy sounds on the street seemed to be isolated in another world. The little fat man could clearly feel the connection between the traffic lights in front of him, the large electronic screen in the distance, and the mobile phones of passers-by, and himself. The feeling cannot be described in words. The little fat man felt that he had absolute control over these electronic devices. Maintaining this state, the little fat man concentrated his attention and looked at a girl who was on the phone under the street light, silently saying in his heart, "Hang up." As soon as the idea came to mind, he saw the girl taking the phone away from her ear, looking at her phone with some confusion, and then dialed the number again. In the next half hour, the little fat man tried to help others hang up the phone 15 times, and change the songs from 4th Street shops that played music he didn't like to Little Stars. Still standing in front of the traffic light, when the light turned green and all the cars started moving at the same time, he changed the signal to red. Looking at a group of confused drivers and the honking of horns one after another, the little fat man showed a smile. At this time he is the king of this city. After satisfyingly experiencing a wave of supernatural powers, the little fat man walked into an Apple store on the corner of the street. After a detailed introduction by the staff, the little fat man chose the latest Apple mobile phone. After all, mobile phones now basically have most of the functions of computers and are more portable. The most important thing is that the little fat man discovered that as long as he can maintain that strange state, even if he doesn't look at the display, the corresponding content can be displayed in his mind. In other words, the little fat man only needs to put the mobile phone in his pocket and does not need to take it out to use it. He can search for any information on the internet and even talk to others. After calming down from the mood of having his first mobile phone in his life, the little fat man walked out of the store and looked up at the darkening sky and the only $300 left in his wallet. The little fat man focused his attention on the new mobile phone in his pocket. Say silently. Find the nearest, older hotel. Following the map signs that appeared in his mind, the little fat man walked slowly towards his destination. In less than 10 minutes, the little fat man arrived at a hotel called Laoyu. After paying $30, the little fat man got the key to the room. Creak, creak, stepping on the somewhat deformed wooden floor, the little fat man came to the room on the 2nd floor of the hotel. The first reason he chose this hotel was because it was cheap, and the second reason was because this kind of hotel does not require you to show your ID card. When people in the welfare home discover that the little fat boy is missing, they will definitely use various means to find him. This small, remote hotel that does not require identity registration is the best hiding place in a short period of time. Only by protecting yourself first can you be better. Searching for missing Wayne. After touching his slightly smaller belly, the little fat man ordered a pizza delivery on his new mobile phone and then began to try to find other information about Wayne on the internet. Where to start? The little fat man sat cross-legged on the bed, frowning in distress. Today he used his brain more than usual in a week. He had no experience in finding people at all, let alone using the internet to find them. After scratching his swollen head, the little fat man's eyes suddenly lit up. Haha, I'm really a genius. I can watch street surveillance. As soon as he thought of it, the little fat man began to search the surveillance videos of all streets across the country, using facial recognition technology to see if there was any trace of Wayne. Half an hour later, the little fat man collapsed on the bed. During this period, not only did the little fat man not find any traces of Wayne, but he saw many crime scenes that were happening or were about to happen through real-time surveillance, and helped. Called the police. It's no way to go on like this. The little fat man who had been a vigilante for half an hour took a bite of the delivered pizza and continued to use his head. Next, the little fat man used various methods, and even invaded some private computers, and also saw some short videos that were not suitable for children. The little fat man was so excited that he accidentally formatted that person's D drive, and also did not I know how the unlucky person feels when he sees that his 50 grams art video collection is missing. The next day, New York. As the plane slowly landed, Wayne and Tony finally returned to New York after a long absence. As soon as the plane door opened, Wayne saw a woman with blonde hair and a fat man in a suit standing outside. Tony dragged a bandaged arm and introduced the two parties in a perfunctory manner. This is Wayne. I mentioned to you on the phone that this little Pepper here is called Pepper and this one is called Habby. Afterwards, everyone got into the car. As soon as the door closed, Tony stopped Pepper, who was about to speak, and said, "Don't even think about sending me to the hospital. I just want to do two things now. The first thing is to eat cheeseburgers. The second thing is to help me convene a press conference. I want a cheeseburger too." Wayne, who was fumbling around in the front row, heard the burger and quickly turned his head and said to little Pepper familiarly. Touching his belly, Wayne felt that he had wronged it a little during this time. Not long after, Wayne and the others arrived at the press conference. As soon as the car stopped, Tony couldn't wait to open the car door. He didn't wait for Wayne and Pepe behind him, and he also ignored the bearded Obadiah who came to greet him. Pushing aside the reporters in front of him, Tony did not stand in front of the podium, but sat down against the podium. "Hello everyone." The bearded Obadiah also rushed over from behind, and was interrupted by Tony's speech as soon as he opened his mouth. "Look here, everyone, sit down." Tony, who was holding a burger in one hand, raised his other hand and motioned for the reporters to sit down. On the other side, Piper and Wayne were talking about some details about life in the cave. A short, bald man walked towards them. "Hello, can you say a few words?" After saying hello politely, the man took out 2 business cards and sent them to Wayne and Pepper respectively. "I'm not a reporter. My name is Coulson, a special agent affiliated with the Strategic Execution Logistics Agency. During this period, many departments have contacted me." Pei-Po glanced at the business card. "I know that unlike them, we are more professional and we hope to learn more details about the escape." After speaking, he looked at Wayne again. "We are also very interested in you, Mr. Wayne. We hope to have a chance to chat with you. Can we talk again when we get a chance?" At this moment, Pei-Po just wanted to look at his boss quietly. "What about you, Mr. Wayne?" Coulson, who was rejected, smiled at Pepper and asked Wayne. "Ah, what are we talking about?" Wayne was not interested in looking at a man affectionately. After greeting Pepper, he followed Coulson to the side. "I heard you are a mutant." Coulson still maintained a friendly smile, and his tone of voice was like a chat between friends. As a professional agent, Coulson knew how to make his opponents lower their guard and better cooperate with his work, not to mention that they had no ill intentions towards Wayne. "Yes, I just woke up recently. What else do you know?" Wayne does not reject his mutant identity, nor does he care about others knowing his mutant identity. Ever since mutants appeared in the public eye, they have been viewed with suspicion, hatred, and fear by the public. But Wayne knew that their rejection was due to fear of this power. Some mutants are afraid of their abilities because they cannot control their powers. Ordinary people, on the other hand, have instinctive fear because they are unable to resist this power and are worried that they will be harmed. However, Wayne, who grew up in an orphanage, didn't care what these strangers thought. If he hadn't just awakened his superpower, he would have been killed by a thief long ago, so he was more grateful for his ability. "Ah, you're so candid." Seeing Wayne admit it directly, Coulson was slightly stunned. Due to his work, he has come into contact with many mutants. Most mutants will subconsciously conceal their identities. If you want to establish a good cooperative relationship with them, you need to obtain their approval first. This is a very complicated and requires patience, work. So Coulson was a little surprised by Wayne's frankness. "Let me introduce my organization to you first." Coulson instantly entered working mode. "Our organization is different from the FBI and CIA and is not affiliated with the United States. We are directly responsible to the World Security Council and specialize in dealing with supernatural incidents." Seeing Wayne nod, Coulson continued, "The emergence of mutants is also regarded as one of the supernatural events. I don't know how much you know about the mutant race." "Almost not," Wayne said honestly. The man in front of him seemed to have a unique temperament that made people involuntarily trust him. Wayne's only way to understand mutants is through television. However, he does not agree with the extreme views of the television media. He believes that mutants are just ordinary people with superpowers. Coulson seemed to have expected Wayne's answer, and said to Wayne like an endorsement, "Mutants are a new race that emerged as humans reproduced. The main difference between them and humans is that mutants possess the X gene. The abilities of mutants are obtained by the awakening of the X gene. After a long period of research, we have divided mutants into the following levels, from strong to weak, alpha, beta, GAA." After talking a lot, Coulson paused for a few minutes to allow Wayne to slowly digest the information. After a while, looking at Wayne who nodded for him to continue, Coulson continued. "Mutants are currently mainly divided into two major forces, similar to the hawks and conservatives that every country has, and our organization has a good relationship with the conservatives among them. The leader of the conservatives is Professor. To hear you tell it, he is really a great leader." Hearing this, Wayne nodded in agreement. Only one who is an orphan can understand the feelings of orphans. Without the care of orphanages or charitable organizations, most orphans would not be able to survive. "I came to you this time because of the entrustment of Professor being constantly with Tony Stark makes it inconvenient for him to show up in person." Seeing that Wayne was not repelled by Professor, "I still have some things to do. If I have time in the future, I will go there." Wayne still admires people like Professor X very much. Every race has its own hero, and for mutants, Professor X is their hero. Wayne could also understand Professor. As soon as he said this, there was a burst of chaos in the direction of the press conference. The bald Obadiah stood on the podium in a panic and began to comfort the reporters below. Tony walked over directly with Pepper, ignoring Coulson next to Wayne. Tony grabbed Wayne and walked out. "Wayne, my contact information is on the business card." Coulson was not angry after being interrupted, and shouted towards Wayne who was gradually walking away. After gesturing OK to Coulson behind him, Wayne followed Tony and got into the car waiting at the door. "I support you in whatever decision you make, Tony." In the car, looking at Tony with a heavy look on his face, Pepper comforted him softly. "What have you done?" Wayne, who had just been busy talking to Coulson, did not pay attention to the press conference. At this moment, he turned back to the seat with some curiosity and asked, "I announced the closure of the weapons department. Stark Industries will no longer provide weapons to any organization or country." Tony pinched his eyebrows, feeling a little tired but also a little relaxed. "You know, Wayne, what happened in the cave. The purpose of my invention of weapons was to better protect this country, but in the end they became murder weapons that harmed innocent people." "Then how do you make money?" Wayne asked casually. Even Wayne understands that if a company that produces weapons gives up its weapons department, it is equivalent to giving up most of its own interests. But I still support you, Tony, don't worry, I will call you if there is any profitable business in the future. Wayne gave Tony a reassuring, everything has me look. Do you rely on your hot pot restaurant plan? Tony rolled his eyes at Wayne, and the originally heavy atmosphere became lighter. A hot pot restaurant is just a dream. Do you know what a dream is? Glancing at Tony with disdain, Wayne reached out his hands with some excitement and wrote at Tony. I feel that I cannot waste my ability. I am going to form a small team, similar to employee soldiers. You see, those stupid guys in the Middle East can do it. I feel that I can do better. That's a great idea, Wayne. What do you think about me running for President of the United States? Looking at Wayne, who looked serious, Tony couldn't help but joked. Although the little fat man has never been exposed to computer technology since he was a child, this does not prevent him from becoming a god-level figure in the hacker circle. In the past few days, in order to find traces of Wayne, the little fat man has used his powers to hack into the websites of the FBI, CIA, the Pentagon, the White House, and various organizations that he himself did not know. Due to their special powers, these invaded organizations found themselves being invaded but could not find a way to organize themselves. And what makes these organizations gnash their teeth the most is not being invaded by this hacker, but that this hacker seems to regard their area as his own back garden, coming around from time to time, but the network security management department within their organization is helpless. Some helpless organizations began to issue bounties on Little Fatty in the hacker community. The high bounty made several very famous hackers in the hacker community participate in the search for Little Fatty. However, nothing was found. This mysterious person was like a ghost on the internet, everywhere, but no trace of him could be found. This also made the little fat man quickly become a great god in the hearts of many hackers. At this moment, these hackers don't know that the master in their hearts may not know more about computers than an ordinary junior high school student. He can become a master in the hacker world only because of his weird personality. At this time, the great little fat man was lying on the bed, eating pizza and looking at the screen of his mobile phone leisurely. The screen of his mobile phone showed the President of the United States workflow today. This old man is really busy every day. He is either seeing this or that. After taking a bite of pizza, the little fat man suddenly said to himself, I don't know where Wayne is. As soon as he finished speaking, the screen of the phone changed instantly. In an article titled, Tony Stark Returns and Announces the Closure of the Weapons Department, one of the attached photos captured Tony pulling Wayne out. Look like. The little fat man opened his eyes wide, and the photo on his phone automatically enlarged, clearly showing Wayne's face. Ha ha ha, I finally found it. The little fat man sat up from the bed at a speed completely inconsistent with his weight, and laughed excitedly. He is actually with Tony Stark. Can you find where they went? The little fat man said silently to the mobile phone. Navigation is on. Looking at the navigation system that automatically opened on his phone, the little fat man threw down the unfinished pizza and hurried to the street. Beep. Identification failed. Entry prohibited. Wow, Tony, you have so many fun things in your house. Wayne took his hand away from the transparent glass door and looked at the various advanced equipment that seemed to exist in science fiction movies like a fool. It's called high technology, you idiot with big limbs and a simple mind. Tony pressed a few numbers on the transparent glass skillfully while leading Wayne to the lower floor. Let me show you the most advanced technology on the planet. After going downstairs, he ignored Wayne, who was looking around as if he had discovered a new world. Tony walked into his test bed and started to make a new reactor. After Tony, who pursued perfection, returned home, he could no longer stand the crude replacement version on his chest. Looking at the empty workbench in front of him, Wayne stretched out his hand and waved it curiously. Ding! After a soft sound, a tabletop that looked like a 3D projection instantly appeared on the originally empty workbench. Seeing a phone-like icon on the desktop vibrating, Wayne reached out and clicked on a phone-shaped pattern. Hello, a voice came from the desktop. Hearing this somewhat familiar voice, Wayne was stunned for a moment and tentatively said, Steven. Ha, is it really you, Wayne? How come you got together with Tony Stark? I've been looking for you for a long time. Sure enough, the voice that appeared on the other end of the phone was little fat Steven. Hey, I'm on my way to your place now, can you pick me up? The little fat man's voice suddenly felt awkward. I don't have enough money to take a taxi to your place. I'll give you the address. Quote. Wayne. Hey, Tony. Wayne walked over to the sweaty Tony with some hesitation. Just as he was thinking about how to speak, he suddenly noticed the change in Tony's chest. Is there a second part of Battery Man coming out so soon? After glaring at Wayne, Tony continued to operate some high-tech equipment that Wayne couldn't understand. Why don't you continue to play with the high technology developed by your Uncle Tony, you ignorant boy? I need a car to pick up a friend, the little fat guy the first told you about. Wayne finally remembered his purpose and said with some embarrassment. Can you drive? Tony glanced at him suspiciously. Quote. After Tony asked, Wayne realized that he had never learned to drive. Okay, driving is not difficult. You can choose a car yourself. The keys are all in the car. Tony dismissed Wayne impatiently. Tony is trying to use better materials to make an armor, and Wayne is just adding trouble and ridiculing him, so he might as well send him out. Tony knows that Wayne's strength, speed, and reflexes are far superior to ordinary people. Driving is not too difficult for him, not to mention that even if he crashes a car, Tony doesn't care. In the garage, looking at the dazzling luxury cars in front of him, Wayne chose an Audi R8 nearby, opened the door and sat in. After spending a few minutes exploring, he turned on the navigation and took the first step in his life, accelerator. On the road where cars were coming and going, a white R8 quickly weaved in and out of the traffic. With his superhuman reflexes and excellent sense of space, Wayne quickly learned the skill of driving. Feeling the surging sound of the engine, Wayne couldn't help but become a speedster. After half an hour, the little fat man squatted pitifully on the street and looked around. Suddenly, a passing uncle walked up to the little fat man and stared at the little fat man for a few seconds. Then he reached out and took out $1 from his wallet and threw it in front of the little fat man. Some of them shook their heads and left. Quote. The little fat man was just about to chase after him and explain, when he heard the sound of an engine coming from far away, and subconsciously looked back. A white R8 parked next to him, the door opened, and Wayne appeared in front of the little fat man wearing a high-end suit. The little fat man looked at Wayne, who was driving a sports car and wearing designer clothes, and then looked at the dollar in his hand. The little fat man felt like crying. I never expected that in the past few days, in order to find traces of Wayne, I first escaped from the orphanage. In the following days, I hunkered down in the hotel and did not dare to go out. As a result, the person I was worried about was enjoying the pleasure of a rich man, life. You Wayne, you made me worry for nothing. The little fat man walked quickly towards Wayne and gave Wayne a big hug. You don't know how miserable I've been these days. You have to take a photo with Tony Stark to make up for my loss. Haha, no problem. Hugging the little fat man with his backhand, Wayne was also very happy at the moment. On the way back, Wayne had been worried about the safety of the little fat man. Unexpectedly, the little fat man ran out on his own. He wanted to ask some specific information, but looked around and saw that this was not the place to talk. Wayne invited the little fat man got in the car. This car is really great. How did you recognize Tony? As soon as he came up, the little fat man touched this and that. For orphans like them, driving a sports car was something they had never dared to think about before. Things are very complicated. Let's talk about it when we get back. Look at how useless you are. Wayne stepped on the accelerator and looked at the little fat man with some contempt, completely forgetting his performance an hour ago. Not long after, Wayne and the little fat man arrived at the gate of the villa on the beach. Looking at the transparent door in front of him, Wayne just wanted to show off and enter the password on the glass. Suddenly, I heard the little fat man next to me say into the air, "Open the door." Bang dang. The door of the villa opened directly, and the little fat man looked at the confused Wayne and said, "Hey, I'm not who I used to be. Now I'm the king of the city." At this time, Tony, who was studying the armor, suddenly heard an alarm sound, indicating that the villa's system had been invaded. After taking a look at the alarm, Tony picked up the steel arm he had just made and cautiously walked upstairs. Quote. Looking at Wayne, who was leaning forward and laughing in front of him, and the little fat man next to him who was a little embarrassed, Tony took off the metal arm and said to Wayne angrily, You will be beaten to death like this. Do you know how you did it? Haha, don't worry, Tony. Have you forgotten that I am immortal? After Wayne laughed loudly, he pointed at the fat man next to him. He did this, and I am also asking this question. It seems that I am not the only one who has changed. Looking at the familiar little fat man, Wayne couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Next, Wayne, Tony, and Fatty sat down and communicated with each other what had happened during this period. Of course, the main thing was that Wayne and Fatty said that Tony was just watching the fun. Are you saying that you really can't die now? The little fat man couldn't believe it. He thought the changes in his body were incredible. He didn't expect Wayne to become an immortal monster. Seeing the doubtful look in the little fat man's eyes, Wayne directly picked up the fruit knife on the table and slashed his hand. There wasn't even a complete blood mark. The inch of skin had healed as soon as the blade left. There wasn't even a trace of blood on the skin for the 10 cm distance that Wayne scratched on his palm. Even Tony, who knew Wayne's abilities, was a little surprised at the moment. After all, he only saw Wayne getting shot last time, but he was not hurt. But this time it was a closer look at the recovery of the wound, which was even more visually impactful. So you can really control all electronic devices just by communicating your thoughts without operating them. Tony looked at the little fat man and asked. For a technology geek, the little fat man's superpowers were more attractive to Tony. Yes, I can test it for you. Seeing his idol asking questions to him, the little fat man was a little nervous and didn't know where to put his hands. Don't be nervous, come down with me. I'll do a test on your abilities. Tony walked downstairs first. As a scientist, Tony prefers to speak with data and experiments. Since he was more curious about the little fat man's abilities, Tony chose to test the little fat man's abilities first. Walking to the computer, Tony gave the little fat man a look and told him that he could start. I'd like to know the President of the United States' schedule today. The little fat man thought for a moment and said to the computer. Since acquiring the superpower, in addition to looking for traces of Wayne, the little fat man has paid most attention to the daily schedule of the President of the United States. Normal people may browse forums, news websites and the like online, but the little fat guy is amazing. He usually browses the websites of the White House and the Pentagon. After all, little fatty feels that the information obtained from government departments should be more accurate than the news media, so little fatty has used major government departments in the United States as news media. Watching the little fat man hacking into the websites of departments and organizations almost without stopping, Tony couldn't help but admire. Cool. Although Tony is confident that it doesn't take much effort for him to hack into these websites, there is still a gap between Tony and Fatty, who only needs a word or even a thought. Next, I'll show you the strange website where I found Wayne's information. Suddenly, the little fat man had a flash of inspiration and suddenly remembered the website with the strange logo, so he silently said to the computer. Wayne, experimental video. However, a few seconds later, the computer showed that this website does not exist. Looking at Wayne and Tony, who were a little confused, the little fat man scratched his hair and continued with some disbelief. Wayne, Mutant, experimental video. However, the computer still shows that this website does not exist. Okay, maybe this website has been deleted. Now it's your turn, pervert. Tony saw the little fat man's embarrassment, turned around and said to Wayne beside him. Test your strength first. Tony took Wayne to his usual gym and pointed to the heaviest barbell. Wayne walked over and looked sideways, 250 kilograms. Then he shook his head contemptuously at Tony and walked straight to Tony's garage. Hey, what are you doing? Tony followed, somewhat confused. Wayne walked up to a Mercedes-Benz G63, grabbed the chassis with both hands, and lifted the entire car over his head with one strong move. Is there anything heavier? Wayne asked Tony and the little fat man, who looked shocked without blushing and out of breath. Looking at the fat man who wanted to run over and touch Wayne's muscles, Tony touched his nose. Strength will be tested later. Let's see the speed. Afterwards, the three Waynes walked to a long runway outside the villa. Come and give it a try. This is where I test the acceleration of my sports car. Wayne walked to the front end of the run, took a deep breath, and took a starting position like the long-distance runners on TV. His right foot suddenly exerted force, and he rushed forward like a wild horse, leading the way. The airflow even blew up the clothes of the other two people. Acceleration from 3.7 kilometers per hour is 217 seconds, maximum speed is kilometers per hour. Tony looked at the data displayed on the screen and curled his lips. So, you don't actually need to borrow a car from me at all. After the strength and speed tests were completed, Tony made an excuse to send the little fat man away, and took Wayne into his laboratory alone with a mysterious look on his face. Looking at Wayne, who looked confused, Tony smiled maliciously and said, "Next, let's use a special method to test your recovery ability." With that said, he turned around, picked up a pile of armors that had been prepared, and began to put them on Wayne without any explanation. "In order to make better use of resources, I decided to let you help me test the data of the armor and test your recovery ability." As early as he realized Wayne's ability, Tony began to make small calculations. He must know that the setting of the armor requires countless experiments, and as long as it is an experiment, he needs to bear certain risks. As an excellent scientist and businessman, Tony feels that his ability to transfer risks is outstanding. How does testing the armor test my abilities? After putting on the armor, Wayne was still a little confused. "Jarvis, the flight device is activated." Ignoring Wayne's greetings, Tony said directly to the armor. Boom! The armor took Wayne directly into the ceiling above his head, making a loud noise. "Tony, you fool!" Lying on the ground, Wayne looked at the large hole sunk into the roof, and finally figured out the relationship between testing the armor's ability and testing his recovery ability. In the following days, the completion of the armor increased rapidly. Originally, if Tony had conducted the armor experiment on his own, the progress might have been slower. After all, the experiment was somewhat dangerous, and some efficiency had to be sacrificed to ensure his own safety. Since using Wayne to experiment with armor, Tony has boldly displayed the spirit of a scientist who dares to think and do. No matter what weird functions he thinks of, he can add them to the armor. Wayne will not die anyway. So if Tony witnessed the completion of the armor with his own eyes, then Wayne experienced the completion of the armor with his own eyes. Wayne's 10th day as a guinea pig. Seeing that the time had reached 7 o'clock in the evening, Wayne consciously walked to the laboratory downstairs. As soon as he got downstairs, he saw Tony playing with his armor. "Tony, serve me and transform." Walking next to Tony, Wayne closed his eyes and stretched out his hands and shouted. After these few days, Wayne has successfully accepted his identity as a test driver. After waiting for a few minutes, he found that Tony did not come to help him put on the armor as usual. Wayne opened his eyes and saw that Tony had stood on a ring-shaped step. Seeing that Wayne finally woke up from his secondary state, Tony said excitedly to Wayne, "The production has been completed and your test is over." As soon as he finished speaking, the disc under Tony began to change, and parts protruded from below, covering Tony's body automatically. "Hey, how can you burn bridges?" Wayne looked at Tony's automated equipment with some envy. "You must know that when he puts on the armor, since there is no reactor in the chest, he needs to make a separate breastplate with a reactor to provide energy, and it is all thanks to Tony to help him put it on somewhat roughly. After a while, Tony had put on a cool suit of armor. Looking at Tony, who had put on his armor and was ready to go, Wayne suddenly ran towards Tony and grabbed Tony's arm. "I flew first. I am a hero. I saved blood for the armor." Tony was just about to turn on the thrusters when he was caught off guard and staggered by Wayne. "Let go. I'll fly first. Let go." The little fat man, who was upstairs with his cell phone and checking various internal information from the FBI and CIA, heard the commotion downstairs and walked downstairs curiously. He said to Tony's password, "Open the door." Looking at the door that slowly opened, the little fat man was a little proud that no smart device could stop him. After thinking about it, he turned around and saw Wayne and Tony pulling at each other. "Hey, Steven, Wayne wants to see you." Tony's eyes lit up when he saw the little fat man coming downstairs, and he said to the little fat man, "Steven." Before he finished speaking, a bang was heard, and Tony flew out wearing armor. At this moment, Wayne reacted and jumped forward. Before Tony flew away, he grabbed Tony's feet, and then Wayne was carried out by Tony. There was silence in the dark sky. Suddenly, a group of bright lights rose rapidly from the ground, streaking across the sky like a shooting star, breaking the original tranquility. "Oh, that's cool." The bright light was none other than Tony, and Wayne hanging on his lap like a monkey. Wayne was seen holding the armor's thigh with one hand, hurriedly dodging the flames from the propeller, and yelling as he watched the scenery passing by on the ground. As if he thought it was boring to entertain oneself alone, Wayne reached out and knocked on the chest of the armor, and said with some dissatisfaction, "Hey Tony, why don't you say anything? That's really cool. Aren't you afraid of falling to death?" Although the sound coming from the armor has been mechanically processed, the helplessness of the owner of the sound can still be heard. "Don't worry, Tony, I'll jump over the plane. It's much more exciting than the plane, but I'm a little hot from the fire." Wayne grabbed the arm of the armor with his other hand, and then used both hands to push hard. He turned his whole body upward and sat directly on the waist of the armor. "I'm sitting tight, speed up, Tony." Wayne, who was riding on the armor, held the armor's shoulders with both hands and assumed a motorcycle rising posture. "Boy," Tony complained silently in his mind. If it weren't for the inconvenience now, Tony would have wanted to beat him up on the spot. Complaints being complained, Tony still speeded up his flight. Human beings all have a heartfelt yearning for flying. After finally achieving their goal, Tony is also ready to enjoy the fun of flying. Tony, who was flying vigorously, suddenly found that Wayne on him had calmed down. He looked back in surprise and saw Wayne leaning sideways, picking up the mobile phone he gave him, and making a gesture to himself, who turned around. 2. Click the shutter button. "Wayne, you fool, delete this photo." The anger that had finally subsided was once again successfully aroused by Wayne. It's not that Tony doesn't accept selfies with Wayne, but he can't accept such a gesture. Based on Wayne's character, Tony could already imagine that Wayne would upload the photos to the internet by then, and he might even give the photos a name called First Flying Together. Then the next day, all major editions of newspapers were full of photos of himself being ridden by Wayne. What will follow will be some ambiguous looks from some people. Tony couldn't help but shudder at the thought. "Hey, this is a memorable moment, Tony. I'll put it on my Facebook page as a souvenir." Wayne pressed save casually and said with some satisfaction. After looking at Wayne, who was still trying to pick up his phone to take pictures, Tony immediately changed direction. "Jarvis, go to full speed and fly up." The sudden change of direction caught Wayne off guard, and he put down his phone in a hurry. Wayne could only maintain his balance by holding the armor's shoulders tightly with both hands. "What are you doing, Tony? I can't even take pictures." "I just want you not to take pictures." Tony, who was complaining silently in his heart again, ignored Wayne and continued to say to Jarvis, "Keep going higher and test the limits of the armor." "Tony, it's getting colder. The outer armor is frozen, sir." Ignoring Jarvis's warning and Wayne's complaints, Tony continued to fly upwards. He needed to find the limits and shortcomings of the armor so that he could make targeted adjustments later. Hiss, as two sparks flashed, the propeller instantly lost power. "We're freezing, Wayne." Tony didn't panic and said slowly to Wayne, who was standing behind him. "I'm frozen too." At this time, Wayne's whole body had shrunk into a heap, completely frozen on the armor. He tremblingly replied, "This is the second time we are falling down, Tony." Feeling his rapid decline, Wayne vowed that he would never do anything Tony drove again. "The last time I escaped, I fell as soon as I took off." Although it lasted a little longer this time, he still couldn't escape the fate of falling. "Don't panic." Tony's voice was still calm, and he stretched out his hand to twist the ring on his leg, just as the armor was about to collide with the road. Bang! The huge reasoning came again, and when they were less than 2 meters away from the ground, they flew into the sky again. "Ha ha ha, how could I prevent such low-level mistakes?" Feeling the rapid flying speed of the armor, Tony's somewhat manic laughter came from the armor, and then he drove the armor towards home. Boom! There was another loud noise, and the armor crashed through the ground and landed directly on the negative floor. Feeling that his spine was broken, Wayne shouted to Tony, who was still excited. "You're done, Tony, you're a piece of shit." In the next few days, because Wayne had a psychological shadow, he no longer pestered Tony to take him out for a flight. Without Wayne's interference, Tony's armor gradually improved. While Tony was testing the armor, Wayne and Fatty were not idle either. "Steven, can you help me find someone online?" Seeing the little fat man checking the schedule of the President of the United States again, Wayne was a little worried that he had developed feelings for the President of the United States. No problem, this is all trivial to the Black King. During this time, the little fat man also learned that he had become a legend in the hacker world, and he also gave himself a title, called Black King, which means the King of the Matrix, and he also branched into major departments and organizations. A sound. A man named Wade Johnson, who was experimented on with me, Canadian, yes, that's him. Looking at the pile of photos named Wade Johnson that the little fat man pulled out, Wayne suddenly discovered the person he was looking for. In less than 5 minutes, the little fat man skillfully found out all of Wade's consumption records and the information captured by street cameras. After being blank for 2 years, this information was recorded again last month. Through the video, it is clear that Wade goes shopping and buys groceries with a woman every day. He is still alive. Wayne was a little surprised. Can you find his contact information? Of course, no problem. I'll call him directly for you. The little fat man said something to his phone and handed it to Wayne. Hey, who are you? Listening to the familiar voice coming from the phone, Wayne said excitedly, Hey, Wade, it's me, Wayne. Ah, Wayne. The voice on the other end of the phone was also a little surprised. Why did you escape on your own? I was thinking about rescuing you every day. But you have to know that I was imprisoned for 2 years. I will definitely spend more time with Vanessa when I finally get out. You can't die anyway. You won't blame me. You beast. Wayne rolled his eyes. I think our revenge plan can already begin. Do you have any clue? Not yet. Wade's voice sounded a little frustrated. He has been looking for clues for revenge for some time, but all he has caught so far are some little luo who doesn't know much information. I think we can start with the orphanage where I grew up. At least the director of the orphanage should know Francis. Is it convenient for you to come to New York now? Wayne suggested. No problem, I'll bring Vanessa with me to show you the real beauty. Stephen, what do you think we should do in the future? This was already the second night after the phone call with Deadpool. Wayne was lying on the sofa and said to the fat man who was playing with his mobile phone, feeling bored. Although Wayne and little Fatty stayed at Tony's house during this period, they could eat high-end food every day that they could only see on TV before. They no longer had to attend boring classes, and no longer had to worry about being sent to clean the toilet in the afternoon. But Wayne was somewhat nostalgic for the self-reliant life in the orphanage. Orphans usually have stronger self-esteem than ordinary people. This may be to cover up their inferiority complex, or perhaps they want to prove that they are not weaker than others. Although Tony doesn't care about paying for Wayne's future living expenses, which is simply a drop in the bucket for Tony, who has tens of billions of assets, Wayne prefers to use his own abilities to get the life he wants, rather than acting like a parasite. Follow Tony as well. What's more, he now has abilities that most people only dream of. Be a hacker. The little fat man didn't even raise his head. You really have no future as a hacker. In fact, I have always wanted to form a team, similar to mercenaries, but the number of people does not need to be large, just like a team of agents. Wayne looked at the little fat man with disgust. Ever since he learned that he was a mutant, Wayne knew that he had embarked on a completely different path than before. In the past, Wayne's dream was just to open a hot pot restaurant. Although he also dreamed of becoming a billionaire, he understood that for an orphan, this dream was too far away. Opening a hot pot restaurant in New York was already very impressive. After possessing the ability, Wayne suddenly discovered that he was no longer an ordinary orphan. The ability after awakening allowed him to easily do things that ordinary people could not imagine, so Wayne's dream was changed to becoming a billionaire. A millionaire, open a hot pot restaurant by the way. Ever since he saw the sizable arsenal of mercenaries in the Middle East, Wayne has become very interested in this industry. In his opinion, even mercenaries with low level of strength can earn so much money. So, then if he forms an elite team and relies on his intelligence, it is not impossible to catch up with Tony. Thinking of this, Wayne once again wanted to thank his superpower. Without his superpower, he could only become a member of the mediocre crowd. But now, he can do it for that charming money, no, for that young dreams to fight for. I haven't thought about where the team can make money before, but now your ability allows me to discover the first direction for us to make money. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. Wayne jumped up from the sofa and snatched the phone from the little fat man's hand. Without asking the little fat man about his wishes, Wayne, who had already forcibly regarded him as a member of the team, looked at the little fat man. The fat man said seriously, what's the first direction? The little fat man was a little confused. Being a hacker, stealing information from major organizations and companies, and selling information. Isn't that what agents do in movies? Wayne looked around and whispered to the little fat man, as if he was afraid that Tony would know his top secret idea and steal his idea to prevent his assets from surpassing his. Didn't you just say that hackers have no future? The little fat man was even more confused. He clearly remembered the look of contempt on Wayne's face after he said he was a hacker. We are special agents, you know. Although we do the same things, our skills are different. Wayne explained patiently, in order to ensure that the first member of the organization understood his good intentions. For example, if Tony went to the street and forcibly kissed an old lady, that would be tidbits of news, and every major entertainment weekly would report it the next day. But if you go to the street and forcibly kiss an old lady, the next day will be waiting for you. It's just a prison meal. Quote. Why would I go to the street and forcefully kiss an old lady? The little fat man was a little frightened. It's also a lumbar intervertebral disc, why are you so herniated? Wayne was a little broken. He finally came up with a suitable metaphor, but the fat man's focus was indeed on kissing the old lady. Hey, Steven, if you hadn't grown up with me, I wouldn't have invited you to join the team. Your IQ would lower the average level of our team. Sighing, Wayne said to the little fat man with a look on his face like, come and thank me now, I opened the back door for you. Have you ever asked me about my wishes? The corner of the little fat man's mouth twitched and continued to ask, who else is there in our organization? Well, it's just you and me now. Wayne paused. When Wade comes, I will ask him what he means. I heard that he is a professional mercenary and can help us avoid many detours. The little fat man didn't answer. He felt like he was on a pirate ship, his future was dark, and he couldn't see any light in his future. Okay, Steven, let's give it a try, starting from the orphanage. We need to make preparations for our actions tomorrow. After patting the dazed little fat man, Wayne returned the phone to him. Okay. Let me hack into the surveillance system of the orphanage. The little fat man took the phone and felt that what he was doing now seemed like the preparations done by the agents before going out to perform the mission in the movie, and he couldn't help but feel a little excited. Wayne and little fatty were both very familiar with the distribution of monitoring equipment in the orphanage. The orphanage does not have many entertainment options, so the orphans can only pass their time through various boring things. Wayne and little fatty once spent a whole day counting the total number of surveillance cameras in the orphanage. After 3 checks, they found that the orphanage had a total of 47 cameras, 46 of which were located in the orphanage and 1 facing the gate of the orphanage. As the little fat man recited silently, all the surveillance images of the orphanage were quickly displayed on his phone. Because the screen of the mobile phone was too small, the little fat man projected the screen of the mobile phone onto the wall through the device. Because it was late, the orphanage seemed a little quiet at this time. Except for the brightly lit dormitory building, there were only a few dim street lights in the playground and corridors. Wayne, we seem to have made a mistake before. Why can I see 48 surveillance images here? Suddenly, the little fat man patted Wayne, who was studying the infiltration route, and exclaimed in surprise, then enlarged and projected the 48th picture found on the phone onto the wall. The 48th surveillance camera seems to be in a room with no windows, only a simple iron bed and a somewhat broken wooden bench. At this time, a man covered in blood was lying on the rusty iron bed. This man was lying on his side beside the iron bed. His clothes were a little torn and covered in blood, and his messy hair covered half of the man's face. This person seems familiar. I'm afraid he has just been tortured. Wayne looked at the scene in front of him and immediately thought of the scene when he was tortured. This guy is a boss. There was an angry roar next to him, and Wayne turned his head and saw the little fat man with red eyes and gritted teeth as he looked at the surveillance screen. This is what a boss was wearing the day he helped me escape. The emotional little fat man was breathing heavily. He still remembered the scene that day. At that time, he didn't know the specific situation of Wayne. He was very surprised by a boss' sudden visit and help. But now that he understood the specific situation, the little fat man knew that Wayne had escaped from the organization at that time. In order to recapture Wayne, the organization would definitely control the little fat man in advance. A boss may have known some inside information in advance at that time, and Wayne's behavior touched a boss' deep inner memory, which prompted a boss to go and remind the little fat man. This could be a trap. Looking at the emotional fat man, Wayne analyzed rationally. Wayne didn't have deep feelings for a boss. Although he knew that he had helped the little fat man, Wayne's sixth sense made him detect a hint of danger. Since awakening his powers, Wayne's sixth sense has become more confirmed its accuracy. "We have to go, Wayne." Realizing that Wayne was hesitant, the little fat man said in a more serious tone. The world was not gentle to the little fat man when he was young. An accident took away the two people who cared about him the most in the world. But the more this happened, the more the little fat man would cherish those who treated him well. "Okay, then let's think of it as us going to explore the road ahead of time." Seeing that he couldn't stop the fat man, Wayne gave in. Just think of it as a practice before the official operation. Wayne still had some confidence in his own abilities. Then, without saying hello to Tony, Wayne and the little fat man went directly to Tony's garage. Wayne did not want to involve Tony in the mutant incident. Although the various functions of the armor were constantly being improved, he was also very aware of the armor's combat effectiveness. But mutants have all kinds of strange abilities. Without the armor, Tony is still an ordinary person. Wayne doesn't want Tony to be harmed because of him. Wayne still chose the R8 from last time. Compared with other sports cars, Wayne was still more familiar with this car. Buzz. With a dull engine sound, the white R8 rushed out of Tony's garage and drove quickly into the night. Half an hour later, Wayne and little Fatty parked the R8 near the Hot Pot restaurant. After all, this sports car makes too much noise. If they drive this car to the entrance of the orphanage, they may be discovered by the security guards immediately. After getting off the car, Wayne and the little fat man did not choose to walk directly from the street. Instead, they turned from the path to the side of the orphanage to avoid the surveillance camera at the gate. "Is there any way you can destroy all these cameras?" Squatting outside the 2-meter-high wall, Wayne whispered to the fat man next to him. His first night operation made Wayne nervous and a little excited. The movement of destroying everything at once is too big. "I can try to let the surveillance camera play the video of the same time period yesterday." Although the little fat man was very angry because of a boss arrest, he did not lose his calm at this time. "Okay, we can go in." After the little fat man took care of the surveillance, Wayne held the little fat man in one hand, pushed on the ground with both feet, climbed over the wall, and successfully entered the orphanage. Where is a boss being held? After entering the orphanage, Wayne and the little fat man hid in a flower bed closest to the wall. "Let me see," under the gymnasium by the playground. The little fat man did not take out his mobile phone at this time, but directly let the mobile phone transmit the information to his mind to prevent the light of the mobile phone screen from attracting the attention of the security guard. After awakening his powers, Wayne's eyes were also strengthened. The dark night did not affect his vision, but instead became his protective color. Wayne led the little fat man slowly towards the stadium from the darkest area, carefully avoiding every patrolling security guard. There were no lights on in the gymnasium corridor at night, but this did not stop Wayne after he woke up. Following the little fat man's guidance, Wayne accurately found the room where a boss was being held. Looking at the locked iron door in front of him, Wayne didn't care to hide anymore. He kicked open the iron door and rushed in. He carried a boss on his back, who had not yet figured out the situation, and then quickly moved toward rushed out. Wayne carried a boss on his back and took the fat boy back the same way. After walking through the dark passage, as soon as he walked out of the stadium gate, he saw several orphanage security guards who heard strange noises and came to check. "It's embarrassing." Looking at the several security guards in front of him, Wayne muttered softly. With his excellent eyesight, Wayne could clearly see that the security guard in front of him was different from the men they had come into contact with before, who stood at the door with electric batons all day long. The security guards in front of him each held a pistol, and their movements and temperament reminded Wayne of the mercenaries who had fought in the Middle East. "You guys find a place to hide." Throwing a boss on his back in the direction of the little fat man, Wayne shouted to the little fat man and rushed towards the nearest security guard. One hand crushed the security guard's hand that was holding the gun, and took the pistol from the security guard's hand. Then with the other hand, he used a little force to lift the security guard up and threw it towards the other security guards who were shooting at him. Go! Bang, 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 gunshots kept ringing out, and the security guard who was thrown out died under the gunshots of his companions before he even hit the ground. After throwing out the security guard, Wayne did not stop. He threw the stolen pistol in the direction where the little fat man was hiding, and then quickly ran towards the other security guard. Wayne has had experience fighting mercenaries and knows his shortcomings. He has never touched a gun and is more suitable to use his body to kill the enemy. As long as you can engage the target in close combat, you can quickly defeat the opponent. In less than 3 minutes, Wayne had already dealt with the first 5 security guards who arrived. Facing Wayne's terrifying physical fitness, these ordinary people could not hold on for long. We have to move quickly. The movement here will definitely attract more people. Taking a boss from the little fat man, Wayne urged with some urgency. Although the security guard who came this time had a gun in his hand, he was still within the range that Wayne could deal with. What Wayne was most worried about was that other mutants might appear. An organization that specializes in studying mutants for many years, Wayne believes that their background must be more than just ordinary soldiers with guns. They need to escape before other more powerful characters come out, otherwise he will not be sure to ensure the safety of the little fat man. Still heading back the way they came, Wayne and the little fat man hid in the dark and slowly moved forward, watching groups of security guards passing by with guns in hand. However, the 3 people slowly advancing in the dark were not found. At this time, a boss on Wayne's back had figured out the situation, so he just clamped Wayne's body tightly with his feet, and the strength did not affect Wayne's movements. Then, just when the 3 Waynes touched the edge of the wall and were about to escape from the orphanage, a huge searchlight shone on the 3 Waynes who were escaping. The strong light made Fatty and Abbas subconsciously cover their eyes with their hands. Wayne, on the other hand, squinted his eyes and looked in the direction of the searchlight. I saw 3 people standing next to the searchlight. The leader was Francis, whom I hadn't seen for a while. On the left was Gina, who was holding a match in her mouth. On the right was a muscular man that Wayne had never seen before. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.